them in order to participate in that. They were given to you by other criteria, so it's almost like this is an early NFT voting mechanism. There's ostracons, they're objects, they're physical, they could be artworks, but they're also voting power inside the DAO. So what I would invite you to do is we're just about to mint the first of these ostracons. If you want to be part of the experiment, now is a great chance to do so. This is an edition of 60 ostracons, and each one gives you one vote inside the Hacumenta DAO, which is set up through a Gnosis multisig, starting very, very simple, Zodiac snapshot. So since because we're artists, we want every element of Hacumenta to be a performance. So if we say it's a performance, then it is a performance, and you are here with us right now at the DAOist, and you're now part of this performance. So I would like to invite us all to count down to the official inauguration of this experiment that is Hacumenta, which is minting the first Hacumenta ostracons. Are you ready? 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Done. So any funds from the sale of the ostracons is going directly into the DAO treasury, and anyone holding a ostracon now has one vote inside the incubating Hacumenta DAO. And good luck to us all. See you in Athens in a year from now.
Hi guys, that was awesome. So I have a public service announcement to make, and that is as follows. At 1400, we're going to have a workshop that is run by AstroDAO, and it's going to be on the purpose of how to form a DAO and launch a token in 10 minutes. That's at 2 p.m. And Inga would like for you guys to know. But ending the public service announcement, up next is API 3. Yes, 1 second.
Test. Hello. Perfect. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Great to see so many DAO enthusiasts here. I'm Ugur, and I work on the marketing and BizDev side of the API 3 DAO, and I'm going to be presenting the fractal scaling of our DAO, basically. So before I get started, who here heard of API 3 before, like raise of hands? Some? That's good. That's good. And who here knows about the Oracle problem? Again, raise of hands. Heard about the Oracle problem before? Okay, some. So basically, for those of you who have not heard it before, I'm going to be going into it slightly. Basically, smart contracts require reliable real-world data feeds to provide meaningful services. If you want a loan, for instance, as Aave, you need price details, and that is natively not available on the blockchain because APIs cannot be directly accessed by smart contracts. The solution to this is, quite frankly, to pull the data that is needed into the respective blockchain that it is needed on. How this typically is done nowadays is through such a structure. We have Oracle nodes here on the right side that are responsible for retrieving the data from like the real world, basically getting it from somewhere and then bringing it on-chain. We have another entity on the left side that is responsible for setting up an aggregation contract because you want basically the sum of all this, the median of the response, that then basically gets fed into the application that consumes it, so the final product, which could be the Bitcoin price, the weather in Lisbon today, or any other data that you can imagine. This setup was very groundbreaking and enabled like a lot of use cases as you know it. DeFi as we know it couldn't exist without oracles, but we believe that there are certain issues with the current setup. The first thing I want to basically bring to your attention is that we believe that the first issue is basically the entity that sets up the aggregation. While there can be hundreds of oracles on the right side that provide the data that you want, it's actually the entity that controls the aggregation contract that has a final say in what you consume, because they are the ones picking out which oracles are used, for instance, for the Bitcoin price feed. And there's no way for you as the data consumer to influence basically where you're getting your data from. The second issue is basically that the majority of Oracle nodes are actually not ran by the actual data source. If you look, for instance, on a stock exchange, it's not actually the stock exchange providing you on-chain with the data that they produce. It's actually somebody else telling you what the data is that you need on the blockchain. And finally, these third-party oracles, so to speak, are also not transparent about where they get their data from. So just to make an extreme assumption here, but how can we as consumers tell that all of these three nodes that you see here are not getting their data all from the same source because they're not being transparent about it? And it would be pretty inefficient if they would all get their data pretty much from one source. So our approach or our solution to this inefficiency would basically be to simply get the data right from the source. So practically to call APIs directly over the blockchain instead of relying on middlemen to do this for you. So for this reason, we believe the Oracle problem is actually actually the API connectivity problem, because if you could basically call an API, aka the source directly over the blockchain, you would do so. This problem assumption pretty much brings us to our setup, which looks somewhat like this. We have on the right side basically our Oracle nodes, which are directly operated by data sources. So imagine Binance giving you the Bitcoin price directly, a stock exchange giving you stock data directly, a weather station telling you what the weather is directly without relying on a third party. And this does two things. Firstly, it creates full transparency where your smart contract is actually getting their data from, as everybody can on-chain see where data is coming from. Furthermore, it practically eliminates like the rent-seeking middlemen. You don't need multiple oracles anymore to call the same data source if the API itself is your data source. This is all made possible by our Oracle solution, which is called AirNode. And AirNode is very simply set up. It is set up in 10 minutes by the API provider on their infrastructure that they're already using for their basically data infrastructure without handling cryptocurrencies, without knowing anything about blockchains. And this solution basically allows us to decentralize the source level of data. Also, this is basically where the DAO comes in all of this. These sources can still be aggregated. Like you basically sometimes don't want data of Bitcoin only from Binance. You maybe want to combine 5 exchanges or 6 exchanges. And this decision is basically managed by a DAO that decides who actually is aggregated into one response. And this means that it is not anymore like a backroom team decision which sources are combined to each other. Everybody that wants to have influence on the data sourcing can have influence by being part of the API 3 DAO. And you become part of the DAO by simply staking API 3 tokens. And the final aspect of our project is basically that we also offer insurance on our data through Claros arbitration. This makes security for consumers quantifiable, because we believe it is somewhat of an utopian thought to think APIs can never malfunction. Like, you can get wrong data at some point, but smart contracts don't care. They will still execute on the data. So it is important for data consumers that they are basically able to manage their risk in that regard. That was a little bit of like an Oracle presentation. Sorry for that. But I'm going to dive into more of the DAO now. Our DAO is basically a custom Aragon-based DAO, and it currently controls about 21 million USDC and 25 million API 3 that basically should help us fulfill our vision of making first-party oracles, data source-operated oracles, become a reality. Some of the things our DAO is pretty good at is basically all stuff solidity. We're pretty confident in providing data on ETH and every other chain that is EVM compatible. We also have a good understanding of what data providers want and what dApps want and need, and we're pretty good at building good Oracle stuff. Some of the things we're not very good at would, for instance, be Rust or Substrate development. We're all Solidity developers, so to speak, so we don't have a field in that. And Airnode is technically chain agnostic, so we could serve a Solana, Polkadot, whatnot, like all these chains, if we had the capabilities within the DAO to do so. We're also not good at speaking French. We have nobody that actually speaks French. So we could use somebody that basically manages the French-speaking community or translates our articles and documentations into French. And there are probably also a whole lot of other things that we are not very good at. So how do we scale and become good at these things? The obvious answer of all of you would probably be to just hire people that can do this. But is that really effective, is my question here. Because think of how many layer 1s there are already. Do you want to hire basically 5 devs that deal with that specific layer 1, and then there's another layer 1 that you want to roll out onto, and then you need to hire another 5 and another 5? Or think about all of the languages in the world. Are you really capable of basically, in a DAO setup, hire all the people you would need to and manage them within, for instance, a language management team? It just becomes very unscalable at some point. And our vision for this is basically to scale through sub-DAOs. Ilya from Near already mentioned the term in this presentation like an hour ago, and our friends at Aragon also like to call these inter-DAOs. So a sub-DAO is basically a group of people or already an existing DAO that excels at something. For instance, they're already a group of people that are good at Rust development or Substrate development, or it's a Translate DAO that can help with Portuguese and French. And they are basically taking ownership of something that API 3 needs help with while benefiting themselves on it, monetary or however. I'm going to give a small example on this. So basically, imagine that there's a team of Rust native developers, that is the programming language for Solana, for instance, for those of you who don't know, comes and creates an X API 3 token to serve data on Solana. They approach the API 3 DAO and say, we want to use your data providers, we want to use your Airnode and adjust your code for Solana, and then basically sell your data on Solana. We offer you 25% of our native token that will be on Solana. So basically, we sell your data for you on Solana, and you help us do that. The API 3 DAO would basically do this through technical support. We would basically give them access to large amounts of data providers. We currently have over 170 businesses that are running basically data sources directly and providing data. And we would obviously also support this potential team with marketing and business development efforts. And a lot of you are probably thinking now, it sounds like a franchise model, who would want to do this, and so on. But there's actually already precedent for this. I'm sure a lot of you have seen or heard of Ellipsis before. Or for those of you who don't know, maybe a little word about Curve once. Everybody knows Curve here, probably used Curve or heard it, one of the major DeFi projects in the space. And basically, Ellipsis is a fork of Curve on Binance Smart Chain. Curve itself had no ambition or no desire, call it whatever you want, but they didn't want to deploy on Binance Smart Chain. But the Ellipsis team wanted to make that product, which is very much used on ETH, available on Binance Smart Chain. So they basically approached Curve and asked for their algorithms and permissions to basically deploy this exact product on Binance Smart Chain, and offered them 25% of the tokens of their native token Ellipsis on Binance Smart Chain. And you see Curve's answer at the bottom, why they said yes to this. The deal was so good that basically they had to authorize the use of their algorithms. And in the same fashion, we think that we're building a framework that can be deployed onto multiple other chains, and we're basically creating the groundwork where other DAOs can join us and continue excelling at what they're good at, be it good at a language, good at development of some language that we're not good at, and basically build this big infrastructure where we have the API3 DAO in the middle and all these other sub-DAOs connecting and adding value while benefiting also themselves. And that is pretty much the presentation. I think I have a lot of time for questions now, so if there are any, go ahead. Yes.
Hello. Oh, has anyone got any questions? Right, here I come.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. It was really good. How do you verify the data sources with API 3? So, I was just wondering, how do you trust the data?
The data itself, you're basically approaching real-world businesses. For instance, we are partnered with Luna Crush or FTX, and these people make documentation available. They're basically publishing a smart contract address and saying, this is our Airnode. So you're basically trusting the reputation of the real-world business behind it. Because FTX providing you bad data is probably reputational damage for FTX if there are, for instance, liquidations that happen on the basis of this. And in the same fashion, also, what a lot of people don't think of, also with third-party oracles, they're actually getting their data from the same source. It's not like they're magically getting that data out of thin air. They're using the exact same people. What we do is simply eliminate the people that stand between us and the data.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, up next is DXDAO with Chris Powers.
Can I get this up? All right. So thank you for bearing with us while we get the presentation up. My name is Chris Powers. I'm a contributor to DAOist, where I focus on governance. What's happening? So today, DAOs are following DeFi into a multi-chain world. So what does this mean? I think everyone in this room knows kind of the promise of DAOs. It's been a popular topic for many years, but it's really only within the last year or two that you've seen DAOs really grow and take giant leaps forward. And what was driving that was the success and growth of DeFi, right? It's only when you have these DeFi protocols and products that require on-chain decisions that do you see that like DAO infrastructure, that DAO tooling start to flourish. And the same thing is happening now with the multi-chain world, right? Any DeFi product, any DeFi protocol, the most important thing they're trying to figure out is how can we live on more than one chain? How can we have a decentralized exchange on Ethereum, layer 2, a side chain, maybe even another non-EVM chain? And that push from DeFi is what's pulling along DAOs to try to figure out how they can operate in a multi-chain world. So to kind of set the table for what I want to talk about today, I think there's two big approaches to cross-chain governance, right? So I think the cross-chain communication one is about a address on one chain that's basically able to control another address on another chain, and that happens through communication, cross-chain communication through some type of bridge. So Aave, Maker, and Gnosis Zodiac's bridge module are all forms of this that enable communication between the chains and enable control of one address on one chain to the other one. That contrasts a lot with DAO's approach. So DAO has what we call chain-native bases, and this is possible because of our reputational-based governance structure, which we'll get to in a second here. This is Aave's cross-chain kind of architecture here. As you can see, their architecture is meant to be flexible for interacting between any EVM chain. Kind of at the core of it here is this Polygon bridge executor and the Polygon executor base. So the Polygon bridge executor is what actually reads transactions from the bridge and picks up any messages or transactions that it should relay along to the bridge executor base, which is basically like the base of Aave on that. Now, it's important with Aave's infrastructure is that it is bridge agnostic. So you can see in this architecture how much of the core of it is based upon the Polygon bridge, and so that means it's relying on the security of the Polygon bridge there. So far, Aave has done a successful bridge transaction to the Polygon base, so they have had a test proposal that passed mainnet Aave governance and then was executed on Polygon through this cross-chain communication tool. The Aave markets are live on Polygon and Avalanche, but neither are yet governed by by Aave. Maker is a similar approach, a little bit different for a couple reasons. First and foremost, Maker wants to enable native DAI minting on other chains, right? I think anyone knows opening up a CDP on mainnet is like prohibitively expensive. So part of Maker's goal in making DAI cross-chain is not to make just DAI easily bridgeable across chain, but how can you open up a loan or a CDP on another chain, and how does that kind of fit into the overall Maker risk framework? And then the other big difference with Maker is their architecture is more designed for layer 2 systems. So with Aave, as you can see here, it's basically between two chains entirely, and it actually requires two different contracts here, the Polygon bridge executor and the bridge executor base. But with Maker, really this one single contract, the L2 governance relay, is kind of like the base or the base of Maker on the layer 2. And that contract can only accept orders, messages from the L1 governance relay contract on mainnet, which is directly controllable by Maker governance. So far, Maker has successfully tested this on Arbitrum and Optimism, but they have not implemented it yet so far. The third cross-communication tool that has emerged, and it's really exciting, all of these have just been released within the last 6 weeks. And Aave, I think, was in August. I know Zodiac is going to be presenting here too. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff that's happening right now. And so the Gnosis Guild Zodiac Bridge model is a bit different. It's kind of centered around the Gnosis Safe architecture, which I think a lot of people believe will be a founding or building block for a lot of DAO infrastructure, and that just enables a much more modular, flexible use for governance actions. With Aave and Maker, those cross-chain communication tools are very much designed specifically for Aave and Maker actions, but the Gnosis Safe design kind of enables a much wider use of that. And then the other big difference between the Gnosis Guild Zodiac Bridge module and Maker and Aave is that Gnosis Guild's Zodiac Bridge module is actually incorporating its own bridge infrastructure. So in the documentation that was released, it uses the arbitrary message bridge, the AMB, for cross-chain communication. Now, this has already been widely used by the XDAI team, and so this is actually what governs that bridge that connects mainnet to XDAI, and it appears that the Zodiac Bridge module is going to use those same validator set to be able to enable cross-chain communication across any EVM chain. So with the Gnosis Guild Zodiac Bridge module, you will not necessarily be dependent on the native bridge, as opposed to the Aave and Maker ones that don't come wrapped in their own bridge. So I guess the question I probably should have asked earlier, but why not set up new independent governance frameworks on new chains? Why not set up the same system that exists on mainnet for Aave or Maker, and why not just put that same system on Polygon or another layer 2? Well, the answer is tokens can be bridged for governance attacks on small bases. If you have the Aave base on Polygon controlling what collateral is added or subtracted, that could be a very appealing attack vector for someone with, some Aave, some tokens that they can go bridge over to Polygon and basically have a governance capture there. So these structures are really limited to where their core governance is happening, so that's why they're relying on communicating governance actions from Ethereum mainnet to other chains. And now DAOs has a much different approach. So DAO's non-transferable governance processes a different approach to cross-chain governance. So just a quick background on DAO. So launched in 2019, and DAO is much different than most other DAOs out there, where a lot of the DAOs, as I said at the beginning, were kind of prompted by DeFi, right? You have a DeFi protocol, then you create a DAO. DAO is the opposite, right? It's a DAO first, and then kind of found its way into DeFi, as this is an area that's blooming, we can govern there. It uses a reputation-based governance system as opposed to a token-based governance system. So if you have a compound token and you buy and sell that compound token, along with it is the governance rights to compound protocol. But DAO is governed by reputation holders, and reputation is non-transferable and associated with a specific Ethereum address. So this means it basically cannot be bought or sold. There's almost 500 reputation holders that are governing Swapper, which is a decentralized exchange, Omen, and then an $80 million treasury. And right now we're all on chain. We pay out about $200,000 a month in our burn rate every month to 15 to 20 contributors, all through on-chain proposals. And again, so the difference kind of in our approach is less about the communication between the bases and more about having native level governance on these chains. When DAO launched in 2019, obviously launched on Ethereum mainnet. That is our home base. That's where all the main treasury lives, and that's also where we make product updates through proposal that changes the ENS domains. But also, as everyone knows, Ethereum mainnet is expensive and getting worse. So starting in the fall of last year, we started exploring setting up a new base on XDAI. And so this is where the reputation-based governance really gives us a big advantage, because we can take the same stakeholder set from mainnet and just clone it and put it on XDAI. Because reputation is non-transferable, it's associated with that same Ethereum address. All you have to do is assign the same voting power, the same governance rights to the same list of addresses on this new chain. So even though they're different independent bases, the stakeholders, the people that are powering the governance are actually the same. So right now we use XDAI for worker payments. This is where proposals are doing because it's cheap and easy to do that. We also conduct the DXD buyback, which is a way that we can trustlessly place limit orders to repurchase DXD. And so that's our second base, and then we just launched our third base on Arbitrum 1. This enabled us to do a swap or airdrop. It has also allowed us to participate in kind of experiment with new governance contracts that we're doing. And so, yeah, there are some challenges to remain. So I mentioned before that there's not direct communication between these bases now. I think in the future it would be really great if we could have trustless fund transfers from one base to another. We do a lot of kind of maneuvering around of funds, and we need to do that. There's problems with syncing reputation across the bases because they will diverge over time. So right now we have kind of the adage that mainnet rep flows down to other bases. So if you have mainnet rep, you can always claim that on another base, but not necessarily vice versa. And then our governance 2.0 upgrade will introduce token-based governance, so we'll have to figure out if some of these challenges from there are there. So I'm seeing I'm running out of time, so I just had the key decentralization questions for people that kind of going forward. Will mainnet voting be only done by whales? As we look to communicate from mainnet bases off-chain, are we doing enough to really enable cheap on-chain or cheap voting on mainnet? And then if multi-chain protocols can operate, or if protocols can operate across multi-chain, how do we ensure their decentralization vector there? So I'll stop there, and I don't know if I have time for questions or if I ran over, but thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. We do have time for questions. Maybe one or two quick questions, good answers. Who wants to do? Adrian, I know you.
Hey, awesome presentations. You said in 2.0 you're going to introduce token voting, but in 1.0 is the reputation not tracked in tokens, or how is that?
Yeah, it's a single contract that it basically can mint and burn reputation, so it's not really a token in any sense of the word. So there's a certain amount that you have, but since it's not fungible, I don't think it would really be a token, so to say.
I see. Super, super cool. Wow.
Cool. One more question. No? Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. That was awesome. And I think we can all agree reputation should not be transferable, else I'll be Usain Bolt. So that's cool. What's up next is another public service announcement. I need to let you guys know that we have the workshop going on at 2 p.m., how to form a DAO, launch a token in 10 minutes. So if you want to do that, head over there. And that's it. Thanks. DXDAO has a table outside as well, on the right, just right outside of this building.
But it was just so funny because it was happening so frequently. So it was like, I was a bit cute, strange, not
Okay, guys, so the workshop I was just telling you about, how to form a DAO and launch a token in 10 minutes, it's on the near track. It's going to be fucking exciting, and 10 minutes is not really a lot of time to form a DAO, so go check it out. All right, and up next we have Kia.
I believe that it's set up so that it can actually do, because it presents it on the other side. Yeah, but it usually works. It usually works like how Kenya says, where it's a separate screen. Okay. Yep. Okay, I guess I have to do it without. Hello? Hi everyone, I'm Kia. I've worked at Gnosis for the last 4 years since 2017, and I'm co-lead of the Gnosis Guild project, which was conveniently spoken about in a prior presentation. And today my talk is on Zodiac, the expansion pack for DAOs. And excitingly, I'll do it without my speaker notes. So it's really nice to be at a DAO-themed conference and see a ton of familiar faces and a bunch of new ones. And I was looking up the other day DAO ecosystem graphics from 2019. I was really pleased to see this one from about 2.5 years ago, where we had legends like the Genesis DAO, DAOstack, and we had hundreds of Aragons deploying, and it was just the beginning of Moloch. And then today, if we look at the DAO landscape and how it's growing, we have, like the DXDAO, protocol DAOs based on software development and decentralized protocols. We have service DAOs, but we also have social DAOs, media DAOs, and even collector DAOs for collecting digital artworks. And the boom has been massive. We can tell that it's really bloomed. So we know the DAO ecosystem is evolving, but are its tools? And the DAO tooling landscape has definitely grown. We know there's many more than there were before. But I wonder if, with the way that DAOs are flourishing now and having kind of a plug-and-play approach between them, what is the open standard that can connect them and make sure that they preserve modularity and composability? And it's been lacking in the space until now. So a composable design philosophy for DAOs, Zodiac is a collection of tools built according to an open standard. Because DAOs are not monoliths, they are constellations. And Zodiac launched with 4 tools built by our team, Gnosis Guild: Exit, Delay, Reality, and Bridge. And these are accessible from the Zodiac app on Gnosis Safe. where you can equip and stack Zodiac mods natively. However, more than a collection of tools, Zodiac is an open standard which anyone can build on to ensure DAO interoperability and to ensure that their platform can connect to other DAO platforms and other DAOs in the space. And each tool adheres to the Zodiac open standard, which consists of avatars, modules, modifiers, and guards. And the entire collection of tools fully encompass, which will soon be available through the Gnosis Safe app. Of course, Gnosis Safe. So we embrace Gnosis Safe as a powerful, extensible, and programmable account standard. However, all of our tools are framework agnostic, meaning that they can be plugged into any programmable account standard that implements the iAvatar interface, or the iAvatar solidity file. On top of this, we have mods built by other teams as well, like the Safe Minion mod, developed by DAOhouse, which allows a Moloch DAO to control any Gnosis Safe treasury based on the outcome of proposals. We also have Sela, developed by TokenWalk, who've now joined as a partial member of the Gnosis Guild team. And this module allows avatars to operate with trustless tokenized eGov, similar to Compound or Gitcoin. And it also enables DAOs to choose from various on-chain voting methods that best suit their needs, as well as in the future more abstraction that allows different governance processes based on different teams within a DAO. And finally, we have guards as a category as well. And the first is scope, which allows an avatar, account, or module to limit the scope of the functions with which it can interact. This enables a DAO to define granular permissions for different control mechanisms and to implement security best practices as you decentralize. And so all of these tools sound great in the abstract, but we can walk through one example in practice. And on a common trajectory today, a DAO begins as a squad with an idea, a small, coherent, trusted team. And the DAO initially begins as a Gnosis Safe multisig with 4 out of 6 signers. And while decisions in a group chat kind of suffice for a little while and have a really special and formal quality, eventually they decide they would like to expand their community. And to do this, they launch a token. And with this, they also launch a snapshot space to keep track of formal decisions. And in coincidence with launching a token, they also equip the exit module from the Zodiac app, which basically mimics Moloch DAO's rage quit function, allowing someone to redeem the proportional share of assets from a Gnosis Safe based on an ERC token. It could be a governance token. And they can set up the module directly from the Zodiac app on Gnosis Safe. All you need is a token contract address and a circulating supply amount. And one transaction later, you've equipped rage quit for the safe. And so they've reached stage 2 on their journey to their own route of progressive decentralization, equipping snapshot and exit. However, through their token-enabled Discord, gradually, like many different centers of activity grow for their DAO. And they decide that having one small team of 6 signers on a Gnosis Safe limits the activity that their decentralized organization can do, as well as requires too much trust in initial members. For this reason, they decide to equip the reality mod. So the reality mod, some of you might know as kind of formerly SafeSnap, which basically takes off-chain votes, whether Snapshot or Discord, any format you'd really like, and puts them on-chain via the Reality ETH Oracle. And you can equip it directly from the Gnosis Safe, from the Zodiac app with the Reality mod, and it guides you through the work of building a template for the Oracle, as well as a cooldown time, expiration, and a minimum bond for the escalation game-based Oracle on which it's built, called reality.eth. And after you've configured the Reality mod from the Gnosis Safe, you can head on over to your snapshot space and add the SafeSnap plugin. This connects directly to the Reality mod on your Gnosis Safe. And this means with every snapshot proposal, you can pre-prepare a transaction for your Gnosis Safe treasury, attach it to the proposal, and then once a proposal has been verified as successful, and that transaction can be executed by anyone in your community. And hence phase 3 on their progressive decentralization route. So adding Reality now gives the community more meaningful control over the treasury. However, the 4 out of 6 Gnosis Safe multisig signers are still there and have veto power over the treasury. To get used to the kind of new decentralization that mods like Reality offer, first the DAO enables Scope, which is a Zodiac guard. And this, as I mentioned before, it limits the scope of functions a Gnosis Safe can call. This way it implements best security practices, making sure that no functions with which the DAO would be unhappy can be implemented. And I find progressive decentralization is something that I think we still need to build a lot of cultural patterns around, both security best practices, but as well trust between each other. So having mods like scope and different guards allow a kind of resilience to organizations that we don't yet see with DAOs. And having done this, then finally comfortable with the security practices and cultural patterns they've developed, they basically set the Gnosis safe signers to 0 out of 1, eliminating the Gnosis safe multi-sig signers, and making the community have full access to the treasury based on successful proposals, but within a limited scope so that no malicious actions can be taken. And this is one example of the way that DAOs can use Zodiac on their own kind of organic pathway towards progressive decentralization. So basically, most DAOs today start as one platform, and it's difficult for them to evolve. And it's important that on their journey, they have the best route that they can take and be equipped along any lines. And continuing the example further, recently there's been much discussion in the community about going beyond token voting, or beyond simple token voting and plutocratic governance forms. And Zodiac keeps this closely in mind. So continuing the example before, you could say, then this DAO that has fully progressively decentralized, they then take an interest in conviction voting, which token holders can do to basically signal their preferences over time and the weight of their decision grows. And they find an app that's on the XDAI network for conviction voting that they would like to use and have it trigger transactions on their mainnet Gnosis Safe treasury. So they equip the bridge module, which was spoken about in the last discussion. It basically allows an arbitrary message bridge between XDAI and mainnet. And this allows them to save on gas fees by doing conviction voting on XDAI and then bridging the decisions back to mainnet and their original Gnosis safe from which the DAO started. And along these lines, these mods are designed to take decision-making beyond token voting, looking to hybrid models using time delays and anti-collusion signaling methods. So we also have a mod called delay, which enforces a time delay between a transaction being initiated and executed. And fundamental to the kind of Zodiac design philosophy is that it decouples avatars from decision-making, meaning that no longer practices surrounding governance, membership, and treasury need to be tied to a specific tool that a DAO uses. Instead, they can be customized independently of any of the platforms. And in short, Zodiac allows DAOs to evolve in a way that they have not been able to before, and takes them to heart as kind of living, breathing, evolving organisms rather than something stuck to a specific platform. And with the programmable account like Gnosis Safe at their core, tools built on the open standard support organizations that evolve over time, meaning you're not locked into one platform. And this allows DAOs that are not kind of monolithic flat hierarchies, but rather different networks of size and scale with different teams that work together on different missions to be able to coordinate more broadly, and to not have to inherit the governance processes from an initial team, or to have to move costly to another chain in order to do so. And so who are we, the kind of team, one of the many teams, hopefully in the future, that is behind the Zodiac Open Standard? So we're Gnosis Guild, a keeper of the Open Standard, and we have values like conviviality, experimentation, and co-ownership at our core. We're a small team, I co-lead it, and we operate using the tools that we build. We're incubated by Gnosis, and many of us have worked at Gnosis for quite some time. So being able to observe the rise of the Gnosis Safe, it's been amazing seeing actually how many DAOs have found the Gnosis Safe so useful, but also seeing a critical need to preserve compatibility as DAOs grow across and between platforms. And hence, both in our own practice with Gnosis DAO and in building the Gnosis Safe, it's become clear that toolset like Zodiac is needed, and also the future of decentralized organizations. Because with Web3, we don't need to replicate the Web2 platforms of locked in all the use cases in one. Rather, we can link kind of modules, protocols, and tools together to customize the experience of what the web could be. And true to its philosophy, although Gnosis Guild is a keeper of the open standard, anyone can contribute to the Zodiac-compliant collection of tools by submitting a pull request on the repository, by this QR code here, or at this URL. And over time, we seek to progressively also decentralize Gnosis Guild's and Zodiac's work itself by distributing contribution, value, and other production that Zodiac produces. And in addition to this, we want to decentralize not only the development of Zodiac, but also its vibe. So we worked with Props Supply, a design studio, to develop a design language for Zodiac that allows all of the mods and organizations to use it to look at the qualities that each affords an organization. So it could be strength, magic, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, and basically overlay these to form badges that are according to what the organization or the tool itself that they have built espouses. And in summary, composable tools like Zodiac create space for organizations to evolve, and a plug-and-play culture of modding, similar to Loot, where there's a sketch of a world and you can fill it in according to how you like. And access to tools, and particularly DAO tools, will be an important part of that future that we'd love to build with more people. So if you'd like, join us in the Gnosis Guild Discord, as well as check out our blog, gnosisguild.mira.xyz, where we publish think pieces on Web3, as well as the GitHub repo, where you can see what we've been working on, leading towards zero-knowledge voting and other tools. Thanks. Oh, and we have a workshop coming up immediately after this in that area, where we'll set up Safe Snap and Reality Mod. So for anyone who's interested, we would love for you to join. And thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Kia. So we have some time for questions. Any curious minds? There we go.
Yeah, so there's Xstar and obviously Ring could be mainnet as well. We're looking into what it would take to build something more like trustless bridges across other chains, actually ourselves, and being able to implement them. And we're assessing the EVM cross-chain compatibility, because basically with the mod that we've built, it can do any EVM-compatible chain right now. We just don't have the arbitrary message bridges that other people have built, but it's on our potential roadmap soon.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Kia.
Of course. Right, it's not mine. Oh, okay. It was on low battery, but it shouldn't be that low. stuff. So they must have just discharged. Give it a moment. So I only have it there right now. I think it's happening. I hope so. Old MacBooks when they get older? Yeah. Why another one? Yeah, 3%. Oh, but it's not charging. That's the problem. No, it's coming now. It's coming now. Yeah, it's charging. Yeah, it's charging as well. Yeah. Mirror, yeah. Mirror this way. Okay, yeah, mirror. Okay. So make sure it's clear.
Test.
All good. Thanks. Yeah? Should I just go? Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's a beautiful day in Lisbon. Big shout out to the organizers actually for putting this together. I absolutely love the venue, love the setup. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Kohlhaas, and I'm the founder of a company called Molecule and one of the founding stewards and initiator of a new DAO called VitaDAO. And so VitaDAO is focused on decentralized funding and governance of longevity research. And this is a tweet that we found fitting around what actually DAOs are capable of, and it's one of our guiding design principles. With VitaDAO, we really wanted to push the edges of what is possible today, and tackle one of the biggest problems that we see in the world today, which is how we fund innovation around medicine. And so this is a cool tweet from Nick.E from Nick Johnson. What's the single most impactful thing a DAO could do with $1 million today? And well, we thought one of the single most impactful things that we see is extending human lifespan and enabling people to live longer and happier lifespans. And if you've never really looked into like the science of aging or longevity research more broadly, longevity basically asks, how can we enable people to live longer and happier lives by essentially delaying the onset of typical age-related diseases such as Alzheimer's, cancers, cardiovascular diseases. So basically asking ourselves, what if we could reach 100 years old, 120, maybe even 150, but without spending the last 10 to 20 years of our lives potentially battling disease. So a lot of our healthcare costs in society today effectively come through the onset of these age-related diseases. And if we could avoid that, well, we could all live longer and happier lives, and that is a cause worth fighting for. Cool. Maybe a little backdrop of how this works, and actually, maybe before I go into that, so my main project is a company called Molecule, and with Molecule, we're building a protocol for decentralized drug development very broadly. I'll go into that a little bit later again. But so we look at pharma and biotech very holistically and ask ourselves, what if pharma worked like an open marketplace that anyone could come into and begin contributing to research and begin contributing to work? And today, actually, what happens, most early-stage therapeutics today are developed in academia and biotech startups. So big pharma, to a large extent, really buys most of its innovation. In fact, only 12% of all like early-stage assets are actually in big pharma, and the rest is all in academia. But in academia and biotech, you find a typical problem, which is called the valley of death. So actually, how do we get stuff out of academic labs and out of these early-stage biotech companies, and kind of in this long development funnel to then ultimately bring it to patients? And today, researchers are really actually struggling to obtain early-stage financing. They're struggling to obtain support and actually have the right structures. So pharma, in that sense, and innovation in pharma is kind of stuck where software development was in the 90s. Do you remember when, in the 90s actually, before open source software, you would go to a store, you would buy a CD with a special key on it from Windows or Microsoft, and then that would be your software license. And today, all of our apps are free to download. There's different monetizations there now, but pharma is really still stuck in that model of like almost selling you a CD key. And that's why innovation is very slow and it's very expensive. So we're here to change that. So what is VitaDAO? So VitaDAO is really a decentralized collective focused on funding early-stage longevity research. And our mission is to extend human lifespan by researching, financing, and commercializing longevity therapeutics in an open and accessible and democratic manner. There's another interesting thing with longevity therapeutics, namely that most of them are funded today by VCs, and in many cases by billionaires. So the world's richest people at some point realized that, like, well, how can we live longer to enjoy our gains more? But that's also kind of a dangerous thing, because if the richest people in the world become older and older and older, we never really see a big transfer of wealth in society. And so we thought, hey, if longevity therapeutics actually become a thing, they should be widely accessible to humanity. And so VitaDAO and its members are committed to nurturing and developing the intellectual property licenses and data sets that result from these projects. So really actually making the underlying research open and shared. One really important thing that I realized working in the space, and maybe some background, I've been in the space since about 2016. I built a company called Linen Labs, building very early stage Ethereum applications. And then spent a while working at Consensus. They worked on data marketplaces. And one of the things that I always realized in the crypto space was product market fit is extremely important. And Web3 and the longevity space have kind of a strong overlap. And here's a cool quote from Balaji. Longevity has the potential to be to traditional medicine what crypto is to traditional fines. It changes the terms of the debate. Because with longevity medicine, we could essentially potentially eradicate many diseases that we typically find today. Rather than actually targeting the diseases, you target the source of the disease, which is aging. Skip this. And so what's unique about VitaDAO? So VitaDAO actually owns the intellectual property assets that result from its projects. Members contribute work or funds to join VitaDAO, and VitaDAO typically provides early stage financing in the range of $50K to $1 million to these early stage research projects. The projects are early stage, they're high risk, they're high reward longevity projects. Funding is much faster than what we see in the industry today, so our funding decisions can be 2 to 3 weeks from when a researcher applies. And then our goal is really to build a large community of academics and researchers via a global incentive scheme by them joining the DAO. So right now we have about, I'd say over 100 to 120 different researchers from all over the world that are contributing to this DAO. About over 50 of them are actually active in different working groups. And these are MD PhDs from leading universities across the globe that suddenly were like, wow, this could really be an alternative to how my lab, how our university gets funding. And it actually works today. So VitaDAO I think about 2 months ago, completed the first funding with the University of Copenhagen and their aging research lab to finance early stage research there. And now VitaDAO wholly owns the intellectual property rights and the data that come out of that, which is a world first. So a DAO now funds a lab and owns all of the underlying resulting research. How do we launch VitaDAO? We felt it was really important to launch through a very fair mechanism. So we did a Gnosis auction in June this year. We had about 635 unique participants in the auction. What was special about this auction, it was the first time that the Vita governance token was ever opened up to anyone. So there was no team tokens, there were no investors, there was no VCs. And so the first people that contributed were really just community members. They contributed funds through an auction into the VitaDAO treasury. And from that moment forth, the DAO was immediately owned by its members. And then those members voted on what anyone else, the team actually that built this, the different companies that came together, would own in the DAO. And that actually bootstrapped a very engaged and I think very fair community. VitaDAO at the moment has about 10 million in ETH and USDC that it's now actively deploying into research projects across the world. And if you look at it from a DeFi perspective, what's the TVL now, or like what is the treasury of VitaDAO really what it has? It is now building an IP portfolio. And that can fundamentally become extremely valuable. But now it's also immediately distributed to all of its members. So the members don't own the IP, but they get to govern it. And the IP is straight on held inside of VitaDAO. VitaDAO is a Moloch v3 implementation that we forked and kind of customized. And so the NFTs are actually held within the DAO itself. This is just a rough overview of what the ecosystem works like. So DAO members can contribute funds and receive Vita tokens in return. VitaDAO then works with different labs to get IP into the DAO and give them funds in the form of NFTs. That can be then out-licensed to industry and third parties. And then we also have different data monetization strategies that are now actually opening up the data sets that result from this research. Just additional slide on like the various IP licensing forms that come from this. You could ask, what does VitaDAO now actually do with the research? So it will progress it to a certain point, for example, end-stage preclinical trials, and it will then find licensing partners in the industry that can continue to develop those compounds, but on terms that are set by the VitaDAO community. So what's special here is, for example, VitaDAO could say we want to out-license this to another party, but they can only bring it to market up to certain pre-agreed terms. What's the structure of VitaDAO and the general governance structure? And maybe something to pause and just say here is that VitaDAO is very different than other, like, let's say, DeFi DAOs that we've seen emerge, or like pure Web3 DAOs, because it's really bridging like the real world, the old world economy, and the research space, and Web3. So in our Discord, it was really important to kind of create a welcoming place for scientists. So if you actually hop into our Discord, you'll see scientists from biotechs, from universities introducing themselves every day and joining the DAO on a continuous basis. And now those scientists, when they bring in research, they actually get rewarded in Vita tokens. And as the assets kind of progress through VitaDAO's pipeline, people that help assets progress earn more and more Vita tokens. Okay, and so VitaDAO structure, there's members that join through the Gnosis auction or that have been earning Vita tokens through contributions. And then there's different working groups. So VitaDAO has a longevity working group, there's a deal for working group, there's a legal working group, marketing, similar structure that you find in other DAOs, but we put a very strong focus on building a community that is very accommodating to those scientists, where they can share their thoughts, their beliefs, so a strong culture around that, and a strong culture around open science and open access to the underlying data that emerges. This is also a challenge for us sometimes, because what we sometimes lack a little bit is the typical like Web3 memification, pumponomics that you find in other Discords. And that's actually still something that we're trying to like bridge. It's like, how do you, on the one side, deal with scientists that are extremely critical, obviously, of these pump schemes, and then but when they come into the VitaDAO Discord, they're often surprised. They're like, okay, wait, no one's talking about like the price here, or like how things are pumping in crypto, and that actually makes them stay. But on the other side, where we've also had a hard time then is like actually continuously onboarding like the degens, just because they're like, whoa, everyone's talking about like really serious science here. Like, okay, I can't like post my I can't shitpost. So that's actually something that we're still actively building out. And then the last group is service providers. So service providers are companies or even institutes that work with VitaDAO to provide a specific service. This could be developers, it could be other labs that are now performing work. It could be legal firms if VitaDAO decides to patent one of its compounds. Yeah. This is kind of what the very rough draft of what the DAO functions like. And then what we've built essentially are different onboarding flows for different people to come in the inner layers. So on the outer layer, you have the Vita community. We've built a very large biotech community on Twitter that now actively gives us a shout out whenever someone mentions new scientific founding models. And then those can become Vita holders. And then Vita holders can become core contributors in those different working groups. And then at the core, we have something that we call Vita Core, which is like the core operational team, and the VitaDAO stewards. So each working group essentially has a steward or co-stewards. Yeah, and that's kind of how the DAO functions. Those stewards can be elected by the DAO, and the working groups are kind of continuously evolving. We sometimes merge working groups. If we see an advantage there, we create new working groups, or we create project working groups. Yeah. Maybe a core question though, how does a DAO actually hold biotech IP? How does that work? I see lots of people nodding their heads. Actually, I'll give a big shout out on that because we currently have a workshop running specifically on IP NFTs and how they can be used quite broadly. If you're interested after the talk, the workshop is in track 1, just outside. So how does a DAO hold biotech IP? So this is where Molecule comes into play. So at Molecule Protocol, we've been developing structures for how IP can travel into Web3 almost for the past 2 years. And so we're on a mission to decentralize drug development very broadly and kind of build an open sea for biotech IP. So this is like NFT marketplace meets ResearchGate. And here you can kind of see like just a rough UI of what that looks like. And now these are individual research projects that are being uploaded by universities. And we back them with an NFT that now someone could come in, they could bid on them. The researcher defines how much funding they're raising. Yeah. 5 minutes? Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, then I'm going to skip this. Basically, and this was a really hard thing to solve, and I get into how the IP NFT works just now. But we essentially asked ourselves, imagine if NFTs did for researchers what they've done for artists over the last 6 to 12 months. So envision, like, who knows Flamingo DAO? Some people? Or Nonce DAO, those kind of structures. So essentially, DAOs that are like building NFT portfolios. And we were like, imagine if there was a Flamingo DAO for diabetes, or for Alzheimer's, or for cancer research. And so essentially, that's what we're trying to enable, building communities of scientists, patients, and investors that are funding and acquiring promising research for humanity. This is a rough overview of our tech stack. So essentially what we're doing at Molecule is we're building on the one side, a supply side of how IP travels on chain, and then a demand side of essentially biotech DAOs that can live and work with that IP. Okay, so now we're getting to biopharma NFTs. So for us, IP NFTs are really a new fundraising mechanism for early stage research. So it's a new technical framework which allows combining NFTs with federated data storage, access control. So essentially, in our case, the data can stay on site. It operates through a combination of Arweave and access control that is built on top of Filecoin that essentially enables the IP NFT to become data rich. And on the other side, it's a new legal framework that utilizes sub-licensing agreements and enables on-chain entities to essentially hold IP. So two things, it's a legal contract, and then it's a federated data access control system, which means now once you can transfer the whole intellectual property rights of a research project and all of the associated data. And if we think what pharma really is, pharma is two things. It's IP and it's data, and it's not much more. If a big biotech company is acquired, it's only acquired for its data and its IP. And what we are trying to do is make data and IP highly liquid, but have it travel through IP NFTs. So this is the anatomy of how an IP NFT works in our case. It starts off with a legal contract that actually can have the identities, the names, and addresses of the corresponding entities. So, for example, a university can have wallet addresses, and essentially then that legal agreement is countersigned by both parties. Remember, an NFT transfer is typically a one-to-one transfer. And so in our case, what happens is both entities agree, hey, these are the licensing terms, and we're countersigning this agreement. And the moment the NFT is transferred, both of that is updated in the smart contract and in the legal agreement. And then on the other side, there's this data access control system that essentially now encapsulates all of the private data associated with the IP. So the IP isn't unveiled. We're not making it public, but it's like between the two transferring entities. But what VitaDAO can, for example, do now is it can grant specific members in VitaDAO access to view and analyze the data as it's emerging. And we have a lot of info on this online. I understand it can be quite a complex topic. Please feel free to reach out to me afterwards. Again, we also have a workshop on this. I don't want to go super deep into the tech. So then how we work. So essentially, members of VitaDAO now vote on these funding proposals from universities and from labs. A lab can say, hey, we want to get this research funded, and then in the back, we attach it to an IP NFT, and then the DAO votes on whether it wants to fund this or not. So this is, for example, the project that I mentioned earlier at the University of Copenhagen. It passed with 88% yes, 12% no. Our voter turnout has actually been quite good and quite high if we look at the overall distribution. Because people in our DAO are actually quite engaged about like, no, we should fund this, we should fund that. Because they're scientists, they're very opinionated. And maybe a last thing is just a little bit about outlook and growth. So we've been amazed by the amount of industry engagement that we've gotten. So real-world biotech companies, universities, labs that are reaching out to us. We've quickly gotten deal flow with some of the best longevity VCs. So we're after like 3 or 4 months in the market, we're co-funding projects, or we're competing with some of the best VCs in the industry. We have 10 to 20 leading academic labs across the world that we're now hoping to launch IP NFTs with to get them funding. And then VitaDAO is increasingly also looking at funding longevity startups, because they are interested in purchasing the IP NFTs that VitaDAO is producing. And so now you're getting to a point where you have like a circular ecosystem around the DAO. The other big part that we're working on are essentially biotech economics. So like biotech IP mining through the Vita token, because the Vita token is really a curation mechanism to source good IP. And then the last point is we're beginning at looking at the fractionalization of the first IP NFTs. So this would essentially mean creating sub-markets that the DAO can now spin out and essentially could allow anyone to begin contributing to those sub-markets. And then you get into a really interesting point because you're now making the IP highly liquid. And you're also allowing a research team, for example, that got funded through this to raise follow-on funding, but now raise it from a much larger amount of people. So in this case also, I don't have to be a member of Vita now anymore to be kind of participating in these projects, but I could also just be a member of the general public and say, cool, I'm really interested in this one project and want to contribute to it. Thank you.
Paul, thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
And your insights. Unfortunately, we're running a little bit late, so if anyone has questions, please attack him as he gets off the stage.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
As I mentioned, sorry, we're running about 10 minutes late, but we're still going to try to get through all our speakers. So now, please give a warm welcome to Dennison from Tally.
I was like, what? That's exciting. Okay, so what do I do? I plug this in. I do present mode. Yeah, I think I'm gonna mode. Yeah. Okay. What's up? Better. I see you. I see you back there.
How's everyone doing? Everyone sitting down? Chilling? Lisbon?
Oh no, I have to do that thing, right? I have to mirror? Okay, I can do this. I can do this. I can negotiate it like this. Where is it? Right there. And then I click. Wait, arrangement. Oh. No. Okay. Yes. Okay. Ready to start? All right. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, that was really awesome talk right before. It's rare that I see things that feel like crypto is bleeding into the real world and can really make a difference. So that was really cool. I think in some ways it leads into a little bit what I'm going to talk about today. It's not going to be very technical. I'm not really shilling today, even though I am co-founder and CEO of Tally, a tool really dedicated to making DAOs work. So that's pretty much the most shilling I'm going to do in this talk. But instead, I'm going to talk about what I call magic internet society. And it's a little bit of a recap of how we got to where we are today, and hopefully sort of is a little bit inspiring to thinking about how we get to where we're going, or where we may be going, or why or how. So the starting is, how did we get here, right? We're in Lisbon, we all flew here, but on a bigger sense of like, how did we get here in crypto? Like we are, we believe in Ethereum, people are building Vita DAO. How did we get here? And first thing is we needed magic internet money. So if you remember back into 2007, before the Satoshi white paper, magic internet money, there were people trying magic internet money, but it was literally that. It was magic internet money. Some of it was like outright money laundering, if you remember, like the digital gold guys that eventually, I think they went to jail. It was really a crazy idea. Magic internet money was not something that was real. And this is like a real sticking point. How did we make magic internet money to be a real thing? And what was so important about magic internet money is that in 2007, money is the only human concept that cannot be natively transmitted over the internet. Right? And maybe that seems obvious or maybe it seems opaque, but I can send you an email and say, hey, I love you, and you feel loved. Right? But if I send you an email and say, hey, here's $1, nothing happens. Right? And that's really, really foundational because that means machines, for example, cannot natively transact with one another because they don't have access to the concept of money. And in Bitcoin terms, it's really denominated in like the price of electricity, right? So that was something that machines lacked, and that's something that we as humans lacked. So 2008 comes along. Of course, we have the Bitcoin white paper. And it builds upon a lot of ideas, Hashcash, things like that, where like, hey, how can we formalize the concept of money in a way that is native to machines, it is native to the internet. How can I email you $1? How can I charge you $1 to send an email? And this Medium post in 2017, pretty far after Bitcoin came out, really summarizes, I really encourage you to go read this. I think it has like 60,000 claps, something crazy. This really summarizes the sort of weird nature of Bitcoin, right? You don't understand Bitcoin because you think money is real. And something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis is there are things in our lives which are just concepts, but we accept them as real things. And we can build off them because we accept them as real things. Bitcoin was magic internet money, right? And it took us years to make Bitcoin a real thing. Many years. Right? For so long, we were ridiculed for being in crypto, for trying to build this thing, for sending magic internet money around. Like, why would anyone pay 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza, right? Today, of course, Bitcoin is real, right? We all know that. Ethereum's real. Many of these things are real. Today, you can go and fork Ethereum and make Tron, and you may hate it, but it's a real thing. Right? You no longer today need to make the idea of magic internet money real in someone's mind in order to make it. You can simply make it. People assume it's real to some degree. And in some ways, it doesn't really matter if it's a decent project or a decent idea. People even speculate on the value of it being real. In 2008, the risk-reward ratio of like Bitcoin being real was really not in Bitcoin's favor. Today, if you fork and say, oh, I'm going to make Tron 2.0, you know that would be on CoinMarketCap by later in the evening, right? Just that idea, magic internet money is real. But this is not a Bitcoin talk. So this is the kind of idea here, right? Building the future is a process of transforming outlandish ideas into concrete primitives that become real. And you see this happening today in NFTs, right? What stupider idea could you possibly think of than paying for JPEGs? Right? You can right-click and download that. Today we're all like, oh yeah, if you check out my JPEGs, right? But that is the dumbest idea I have ever heard of, right? But people worked long and hard to make that stupidity real. And I say stupidity lovingly because it is stupid, but I have so many NFTs. Like, when I first heard of NFTs, I was like, oh, I am so in. I love it, right? But we've made that real to the point that Twitter is like, oh, you know what, we got to authenticate these people's JPEGs, right? Like, you can't just use any JPEG for your profile picture, right? You got to own that JPEG. Sometimes these outlandish ideas, what we need to do is we make them real. And then what happens? The world shows up and builds on it, right? So, once we had magic internet money, we could build magic internet banks, right? If you had said to someone in 2007, hey, I am going to make this magic internet bank, and you're going to put magic internet money in to borrow magic internet money out. And if your magic internet money ever goes below a certain magic internet value, I'm going to liquidate you and keep all your magic internet money. So stupid. Right? That's so stupid. Imagine playing Monopoly and like your parents just like, yeah, so I'm going to mint this and you're going to get a die out and it's going to be fantastic, right? But once magic internet money was real as a concept, you could build the next crazier thing, which is magic internet banks. You couldn't build magic internet banks before you made magic internet money real in people's minds, right? Because using DAI and say, hey, DAI is worth $1 is not so crazy once you just paid $400 for a Bitcoin, right? Once we had magic internet banks, we could build magic internet finance, right? And that's DeFi. And this seems kind of a funny play on words, magic internet money to make magic internet banks to build magic internet finance. But this is a really important concept about all the things that we're building, right? You can't build a magic internet financial system before you have magic internet banks. And again, in 2007, if you said, hey, we're going to build this global network of all these companies with billions of fake money in their treasuries, you would have just, it's too absurd. Of course, it all seems real to everyone here because I'm sure everyone here participates in it, right? You all participate in a crazy idea built on another crazy idea built on another crazy idea, right? So that kind of gets to where we are today. And this will probably be a shorter presentation, so I'm not going to really bore you. Once we had magic internet finance, we needed magic internet organizations to run it. Now, that's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, right? We were using magic internet organizations to do other things, but we really needed magic internet organizations to run our magic internet financial system, right? Because who runs it? It's magic. It's not real, right? So you need this not real concept to run this not real concept built upon a not real concept. But the point is, we keep taking a progressively crazy idea, we make it a concrete primitive, and suddenly our society can build upon it as if it were real. And this isn't so crazy, right? If you think about paper money, that's a pretty ballsy move for the government to be like, hey, I wrote it down. You know, if you've ever seen New York City has a museum of early New York City stuff, and one of the early currencies of New York City was a stack of paper, and they would write on it that said, oh, the city owes you, a shilling or whatever they were using back then, and they would tear it off in a really funky way. And the way you would redeem it, you could go around New York City paying for haircuts or salted pork or whatever it was that you bought back then, right? And you could take it back to the city, and they would find the other half of that slip and fit it together, and if it fit it together, oh, that was money, right? That's ballsy. That is some dumb stuff, right? But it was real. It became real, and people built on it, right? So if you look at where we are today, the vast amount of our real money is not real. It's just zeros in somebody's database table, right? We never actually hold it. All these crazy things are crazy ideas that we incrementally made real to the point that today people take them as real automatically, right? People, in the early days of Bitcoin, people would be like, I just want dollars. And you're like, you're getting fucked, right? But that was how they saw things. So, actually, I am doing a little shilling. This is Tally. We sort of support DAOs. I slipped that in there. So let's recap, right? First, we have magic internet money, Bitcoin. Then we have magic internet banks, MakerDAO. There's other people there, right? This is sort of like a summary to get you where I'm going. Then we have magical internet financial systems, and then magic internet organizations. And actually, these last three are kind of bundled, right? Maker, in a way, you could say, kind of did all these ideas. DAOs got kind of derailed with the DAO, right? DeFi really couldn't really happen until you could, lend and buy and leverage yourself naturally, right? So that's where we are. We're in the phase right now of making magic internet organizations real. I first personally really got into DAOs in 2017. I was part of a group called Crypto NYC in New York, and a lot of projects doing their ICO thing would come in and they'd road show us and be like, we're going to do this DAO. Aragon was there. Big props if they're in the room. But it was too early, in my opinion, right? I was just like, yo, that's too crazy. At the time, Maker came in, they're like, oh, we're going to have this like bank, and it's going to like be virtual, and then maybe somebody will have some like gold in like Singapore, and then if you like go bust, you can like go to Singapore and ask for your gold. I was like, that's stupid. Never going to work. But look where we are today, right? Not only does it work, but so many other things have been built upon this like craziness, right? So the sort of point of, and the real question that I think lingers over what we are building with DAOs is what comes next. The idea that we can build this permissionless organization that allows the opportunity around the world to participate in something equally and fairly is, in its core, a crazy idea. Something that I like to talk about a lot is how we don't know, like, there's this phrase like fish don't know that they're wet, right? When you open a company in the United States and in many countries, you have to ask the government nicely for permission to hire someone, right? You can't just hire somebody. You know, you can't say, oh, hey, you're nice. You have to do an employment eligibility check on them, which is effectively the government saying, hey, we decide who you hire. We think that's normal, right? That's something that's normal. We do that all the time. But there's a great phrase, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. This is what's preventing opportunity from being evenly distributed, right? Because the state, other organizations have a say on who can participate in what. I think you sort of feel the same thing with like this, accredited investor status, right? There was someone on Twitter the other day, it's something really funny. The first line was like, the state, we're here to protect investors. We don't want them to lose their money. Also the state. Mega millions, spend all your money, right? And this is a core thing, right? Because we don't notice that, but that is a drastic amount of inefficiency. At Tally, when we started hiring and we went to hire employees outside of the United States, we got approached by a lot of PEO firms, companies that service, companies inside the United States where they say, hey, we'll go hire folks for you in Argentina, we'll go hire folks for you in Dominican Republic. And what we'll do is we'll only charge you 18% of their salary. And what's even better, and they actually said this to us, is you have no responsibility to these people. You can fire them at will. You don't have to give them any stock. You don't have to worry about their health insurance. You can get rid of them whenever you want, and we work with the best VCs in the world. Right? That's the selling point. Right? And what are these people doing with us, right? Our team members. I have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to have to wrap this up, right? They are bringing knowledge to our company, right? They're bringing knowledge to our team, right? And it's a new form of exploitation of saying, hey, we are going to build these organizations that work on top of this state-sponsored exclusionary opportunity structure, and we are going to extract value out of people in other places because, well, they don't have a better opportunity. DAOs, magic internet organizations, address this inequality and opportunity. And that idea is crazy, right? But we can make it real. And we're making it real, right? When you look at things like VitaDAO, they're using NFTs to own IP so people can live forever, right? Like, truthfully, that is an insane collection of insane ideas. But it's real because they make it real. So, because I'm running out of time here, the real point of this is where are we going? I think it is magic internet society. In 2007, if you said in the future we will use math to run how we live and distribute opportunity and talent and resources on this planet, it would have seemed like sci-fi. But we are not so far from that moment. We need still to make DAOs real. They're real to us, but are they real to the people outside? And slowly they're becoming real. They're becoming real through buying NFTs, where they join a crazy organization that's all about drunk high apes that sail in yachts, right? Like, sounds crazy, but it's not anymore, right? So what I want to leave you at with is the future is magic internet society, where we make it possible to build a better world using the technologies that we built on. And how we do it is we break down the crazy with little incremental crazy steps. And as we make them real, more people will show up and build cooler, crazier ideas on top of them. And we'll get there, maybe not all in one step, but we'll get there. And this is the journey that I think we're on, and the journey that I certainly believe in. So I think I'm out of time. That's that. Oh, yeah. You can also join our Discord, and we're hiring.
Hello. Desmond, thank you so much for your presentation. We still have 2 more minutes. If you want to take any questions from the audience, I'll run around with the microphone.
If you find people. You have any questions really quick? Handsome man in the back with a beard.
My question is more like, will these two society and nature, like, will live in parallel for how long, and if one will be like, if our internet magic society will take over the other one, and the other one will stop making sense at some point, and the same goes for the organizations, for the banks, and for the finance, and all the roadmap that you built up until this conclusion. That's my question.
I would say that nothing that humans have ever created has ever really gone away, right? We have cars, but there's still horses. We have digital money, but there's still paper money. We have paper money, but there's still gold, right? I don't think these things will ever go away, but certainly if you're building in a growth industry, you're not doing horses and carriages, right?
Is this a society fork?
I think it's a society evolution, right? The fact that, there's an interesting problem with blockchains when you're building a blockchain, that you have a fundamental limit of the speed of light and how fast you can do consensus, because your information on one side of the planet has to actually get around to the other side of the planet, right? A lot of the problems of human society, in my opinion, are kind of information asymmetry, right? There's that idea that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So in many ways, I think what we are doing is making the transmission of information, of messages between humans faster, and that's sort of like a natural evolutionary process, right? The idea that these PEO firms exist to do some sort of new form of like sugarcane sharecropping in the new intellectual new world, right? It's incredibly offensive. It's been around for a long time. It's just sort of like switched modalities, right? But it's incredibly offensive. But with tools like crypto, with tools like DAOs, with the things that we're building, that information sort of obliterates that idea. The Juneteenth, the African-American holiday, is a celebration of when the slaves in Texas, who were already free, found out they were free, right? So they were slaves not by law, but because they didn't know they were free, right? So a lot of the things that we're building, it's kind of this information speed of how quickly we can make this idea real in your head. Right? The day that you know that you can participate in an organization fairly as a true member, to have fair upside, to be able to contribute, is the day that you stop going to work. I mean, so many people that we meet, it's even like crypto Twitter, if you read it, it's just like, hey guys, congratulations to me today, I quit my job, I'm going full-time JPEGs, right? Sounds crazy, but once they found out, oh, by the way, the thing that you loved all your life, drawing in your sketchbook, actually you can make a living at that. You don't have to go suck your life out for something else. That's that kind of like information asymmetry, right? Where suddenly, once it's real, it's real.
And congrats on your talk. I loved it.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Great. Thank you so much, Denison. Please let me welcome Tamlin from Nada DAO, please. Well, welcome to her, please. Great.
Hello. Hi everyone. Hey, so thank you for having us at NALA DAO here today. Super amazing conference. Love it. So I'm really delighted to speak to you about NALA today. So NALA is a new liquidity and staking DAO that is focused on the emerging decentralized derivatives kind of layer to this emergent, decentralized financial system that the previous speaker was speaking about. And the title of today's topic is Lucy in the Sky with DeFi. That's just a play on the fact that we've had a go at reinventing or reimagining how liquid staking derivatives can work. So we'd like to take you guys through that. But we'd also like to speak a little bit about what NALA DAO is and, what it's all about. And so just a little bit about me. I'm formerly a commodity derivatives trader, turned DeFi head in the last sort of 4 years, been working on decentralizing derivatives and also decentralizing that market ownership economy, which I think is super interesting and useful as we emerge as a society that is more open and more fair. So, as I said, to kick it off, I'm going to speak a little bit about NALA. So, who is NALA? Actually, we formed as a bit of a collective. It's people from all sorts of walks of life. We have just the most amazing people. We have derivatives traders, we have data scientists, we have quants, we have engineers, we have systems engineers, we have NFT collectors, we have DeFi apes. This is a group of people who have come together who are really interested in this reshaping of the ownership economy and how the DeFi derivatives ecosystem sort of grows over the next 6 to 12 months. And in particular, as we've been talking about things that are important to us, defending decentralization, super important, and making sure that, we are helping and pushing and participating in increasing decentralization in these markets. So removing unfairness, removing economic barriers, removing knowledge barriers. And we're very passionate about radically open markets. So these are markets that are owned and run by communities. So we basically agree with Arrington Capital's report that they put out some months ago that basically summarize this as there's a space race for derivative markets that's looming. And it's because as derivatives markets become cheaper to create, you can start to bring the existing markets on chain. You can, when the trade life cycle is fully decentralized, you can run basically all of the current derivatives markets on chain. But what's also really exciting, and just to paint the picture here, the current size of the traditional derivatives markets is massive. It's hard to even understand how big it is. And it's because, it's much bigger than the sort of net wealth of assets in the world. And that's because derivatives are all about trading future outcomes. So, some people might be worried that they just want to cap some particular risk, like maybe it's gold. Let's talk about gold. Like maybe they want to hedge against gold plummeting to a particular level, or somebody else wants to lock in a price for gold, or someone else wants to hedge the other direction, or someone else is worried about the volatility of gold. So you can have many derivatives that are created on that same underlying. And that's what makes derivatives so huge. But here's the thing. We believe that actually derivatives markets can be much bigger. So firstly, as the previous speaker mentioned, there are a lot of people that are excluded from using derivatives markets. The World Bank did a study that showed only 5% of African companies use derivatives compared to 85% of UK companies. And that's just a big disparity in terms of adoption of these markets. And the reasons that were sort of investigated or highlighted in the study were, just lack of access primarily, and lack of sort of education and knowledge on how to use these markets. So we believe that onboarding the currently excluded people is going to be a really powerful aspect of decentralized derivatives. But then also, really excitingly, is we're going to be able to empower this sort of creative creation of new markets. And so if you think like micro-sized markets or ephemeral markets that can spring up quickly in response to a particular event. So after the pandemic, I'm sure that there were, investment banks and high net worth clients doing derivatives to help hedge their pandemic risk, but that wasn't really open to the normal, small, medium enterprise or individual. So responsive markets, I think, will get really creative and exciting as you see AI type, logic spinning up markets that we don't even know about for, efficiently distributing, efficient resource allocation, basically. And that forms a component of this magic internet society that the previous speaker spoke on. So NALA really exists to build this new paradigm. Protect against whale-owned infrastructure and markets, turbo boost the market ownership economy, and also just provide easy pathways to participation. Because we know derivatives are kind of complex and a strange thing for many, many people. So, in essence, as I said before, NALA is a liquidity and staking DAO for decentralized derivatives. And what NALA is building is essentially that application layer for DeFi derivatives to open up this infrastructure to those who are currently excluded. But we believe it's really important to also be participating at the infrastructure layer. So NALA is running a node on Vega and will continue run other nodes for the sort of multi-chain DeFi world, basically. And also engage in that decentralized governance at the infrastructure layer. But today, what I really wanted to dip into really quickly is what kind of investment and staking pools, the kinds of things that NALA can launch to abstract the complexity away and allow people to participate in these markets. And as promised in the title, we'll also have a look at liquid staking. Right, so NALA sort of vaults and pools. This is a way of launching products similar to, as you've seen, other protocols do, but again with a focus on abstracting away the complexity of dealing with derivatives markets. So the thing that makes derivatives markets difficult is often they're traded on order books. They are often require a lot of post-trade management. So once you open a position, there's margining, rebalancing that needs to happen. So they take a lot of there's a lot of the liquidity protocols themselves are also quite complex. So the idea is to provide some ability for people to passively put their capital into a vault, and we, as traders and data scientists and so forth, are building out integrations to the DeFi protocols that are out there. So there's various types of vaults and pools you can get, and it's kind of what's really exciting is that you can bring, using derivatives, you can actually bring real world risk on chain. So non-crypto native exposures can be natively traded on chain. So things like, what will happen to the oil price, index tracking, for equities, this kind of thing. Even trading things more complex like volatility spreads. And I think there's some interesting products that will emerge as we dig in and we get innovative and creative with our community around, even on-chain native risks that would benefit from being hedged. I mean, you've seen hash rate futures as an example, but I think there's a whole layer around the data provisions, so Oracle Insurance as well. So these are things that we will develop out with the community, and over time we will be sharing this intellectual property so that the community themselves can build vaults, and hopefully we'll get that kind of social trading happening as well. Right, but promised to talk about liquid staking derivatives. So I want to talk through the typical liquid staking model is that on a proof-of-stake network there is a governance asset that is used to help secure the network. And basically what this governance asset is it's like an option to always be able to stake and get a return for having staked. So embedded into the token is this sort of perpetual optionality forever. And so what the typical liquid staking design is, and this is very simplified, but basically you create a smart contract that sits between the proof-of-stake blockchain and the holders of the token, and people can deposit into that smart contract instead. And that smart contract will then delegate onto the proof-of-stake blockchain, and the proof-of-stake blockchain will return to that smart contract any staking rewards, which they will then distribute back. And there's various reasons this has emerged, and any of you who have been familiar with Lido or played around with that will know that there's with Ethereum 2, there's like a minimum size limit to be able to participate in staking. So the liquid staking contract can act as an aggregator. But also it can give more favorable sort of entry and exit type conditions. But I think the most exciting thing, or the most compelling aspect of liquid staking, is that it allows you to simultaneously exercise the optionality in your token and collect the staking rewards, but also basically take that token and say, well, hey, I've got all this future optionality and this future value inherent in the token. I want to be able to use that as collateral in the DeFi ecosystem. So as we started to think about, because we're a validator on Vega, we started to think about offering a liquid staking service. And so as a derivatives trader, I started to think that, wouldn't it be great, for a system like Vega, where the future yield is basically uncertain. It's not a fixed yield. It depends on how much trading and adoption of the network there is. Wouldn't it be cool if I could sell parts of my future optionality? So I could maybe sell some of the forward returns without forsaking the full optionality of the token. Or alternatively, if I was intending to use Vega, I was gearing up, I was creating an integration and I intended to use it in a year's time or 6 months' time or something, I could purchase ahead of time the Vega tokens I wanted, but I wouldn't have to purchase between now and that 6-month period. So basically giving a little bit more granularity around your sort of forward curve and your forward management of your exposures and risk and portfolio. And I was kind of inspired by the power markets because they are, in the power markets there's a floating unexpected spot price, and so participants don't typically want to wait and see what that yield is going to be or that cost is going to be. They want predictability. So the Nala's liquid staking system, and we're really seeking feedback on this, so please don't hesitate to come and say hi and chat about it. But basically what we're thinking is that if you lock a stake token into the liquid staking contract, and then that liquid staking contract, just like the previous system, can delegate to the proof of stake network, receive the staking rewards, but instead of getting one token back, you actually get multiple. And those multiple really represent the forward slicing in time of your option on the yield. So to do this, to achieve this, the system works where there is a perpetual ownership token. If you could see, sorry, I didn't realize you can't see me pointing. But there's a perpetual ownership token. So this is sort of like whoever holds this is able to get back a potentially Vega token. This is the example we're using at the moment. Also, whatever the current spot period is. So say this liquid staking smart contract was configured to slice into quarters. What it would mean is, and I put my token in, I would get back a perpetual ownership token, I would get back the Q4, because that's the current quarter we're in, and then I'd also get back Q1, Q2, Q3, etc. for next year, and in future years. And in fact, how far out that goes is also just configurable within the smart contract itself. So basically up to the community and what it thinks is useful. So let's walk through a little example to show why and how this could be useful. So say today, if the Nala liquid staking smart contract was created, what somebody could do, so we'll use Lucy. Lucy, if she were to hold 400 Vega tokens, for example, and stake her Vega on the Nala liquid staking derivative smart contract, she would receive this series of tokens out on the right over here. This is, by the way, just an artistic impression. A friend of mine's an artist, and she drew this as an artistic impression of the design. The size and width of the pipes or anything doesn't mean anything. But the point is you get these series of forward tokens. So you get the perpetual ownership token, the current token, and the 4 quarters, for example. Now, say she just wanted to get some money today, maybe, let's say, or it's one way to think about it. She could, first of all, her spot token is already starting to earn rewards. Admittedly, this would be if Vega is live, and it's not quite yet, but in the instance it was. But what she could do is opt to sell forward her Q122 token, for example. And So maybe she sells it to Alice. Maybe it's 4 DAI per token, and so we've got Lucy receives 1,600 DAI today, right? Now this transaction could have all happened in a decentralized way. Lucy doesn't need to know Alice. Alice doesn't need to know Lucy. It could be facilitated through some other DeFi, matching mechanism. But in any case, Lucy receives that DAI today, and Alice receives the token. So she now has the token, and it's a completely credit risk-free arrangement. Alice can now knows that she is going to automatically, just by holding that token in her wallet, she doesn't even have to do anything with it. She is going to be able to claim the rewards of the staking rewards over that future period. So let's fast forward to the end of Q1 22. Alice has, received all the staking rewards through Q1 22. And what the effect of this is that Lucy is essentially locked in her token reward. So it's locked in her staking reward to be $4 DAI over that, per token over that Q1. So it's another way to think of it. It's like swapping fixed for floating. Floating for fixed. Now look, if the staking returns end up being higher, then Alice sort of profits. That's great. I presume Alice has only purchased these thinking it would be higher, or at least has a reason for purchasing it that has something to do with the rest of her portfolio. Maybe it's hedging some other risk. As I said, Lucy's achieved a sort of certain financial outcome, but hasn't had to forsake all the optionality within that token. So I think what's compelling to me about this is that both parties have traded a future outcome, but without taking on credit risk. And as a derivatives trader, I think that's kind of cool. So the Nala liquid staking derivatives components, so you've got a market operator, and they are the ones who liquid stakers interact with the market operator, and the market operator issues the tokens. And, as time ticks over, obviously some tokens are becoming, they are rolling through and becoming, in the past or expired. And so the market operator will have a schedule for issuing new ones. Conversely, if a liquid staker collects all of the currently issued tokens, so the full basket of like the proof of the perpetual ownership token, the current spot and all the forward tokens, and submits it to the market operator, they can get the original token back. The clearer is the one who's responsible, or the entity in the system that is responsible for distribution of the staking rewards. And that distribution happens to the holders of the spot tokens, as I said. There's some interesting problems that we're working on around this in terms of, scalability and, how it kind of works with as low gas as possible. So we've had some interesting sort of ideas around that. Really happy to talk to you guys about it. The governor is basically helping use the voting weight that is being delegated. And that will all happen through the DAO very transparently. And you can actually have a vesting ballet. So this is just because I know that a bunch of tokens in the Vega ecosystem anyway are going to be locked up for the next year or so, or more. And so the vesting ballet, and they linearly unlock. So rather than having to kind of re-stake, liquid stake every day or whatever, the ballet can handle that for you. And then the key, really important thing is that the liquid stakers are then able to use these tokens out on the DeFi protocols. And all of the forward tokens, like not the current spot token, that's a little bit more complex, and I'm happy to dig into that, if anyone's interested. But all the forward tokens can get traded very easily. They can be traded off-chain. They can be traded through most DeFi, sort of matching algorithms and pools and whatnot. So our liquid staking roadmap, we've written the slide paper. It's in draft, seeking community feedback. We've had some really great feedback. There are a bunch of other, token splitting type approaches out there. I haven't seen one yet that token splits over time, and we're lucky to have the founder of Prism Protocol that's operating on Terra also advising Nala. We're working on a technical design currently, and there will be some implementation, auditing and testing, and hopefully launch Q1, Q2 next year. So I think I'm pretty much out of time, but I just wanted to wrap up to say, just to remind you, like our thesis is that decentralized derivatives is really the last piece of DeFi technology that's kind of yet to be solved really well. I think there are some really compelling solutions coming to market now. But as they do, we expect there to be a Cambrian explosion of new markets, and we're really passionate about building out this ecosystem. So if you're interested in helping us out, please come and join us on our Discord. I think we have some contact details here. Thank you.
Kamlin, thank you so much for that talk. I would love to get questions, but we're running out of time.
No problem.
But again, if anyone wants to ask questions, Kamlin, I'm sure you'll stick around for a bit. And now let me welcome the team from Balancer, please. Anna? And Gnosis.
Test. This one is up. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, all good. All right. Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Doing good? Energized? Woo! Who's ready for the after party? Woo! Who's going to the after party? Woo! A lot of people? Nice. All right, so today we have a somewhat fireside stand about the Balancer Gnosis protocol. We have Jeremy from Balancer and Anna from Gnosis here. I'm Luke, nice to meet you. I'm strategic lead at Prime DAO, also involved in the DAOist, and I'm helping the Balancer Grants DAO to allocate grants. So if there's any chance you hear something that you like and you want to build on top of it, come chat with me. There's a lot of cool stuff to be built. Without further ado, maybe you two want to do a quick intro, and then we can tell a bit more about the Balancer Gnosis protocol.
Sure. No, you go first.
All right. Cool. So basically I'm here today from the Gnosis protocol team. However, we will be spinning out of Gnosis. So I think we are mostly known under the name CowSwap, which will also be the name of the new company that we are creating. And I've been with Gnosis for the last 4 years. Always working across the different products, the Gnosis Safe, which also has a couple of people from the team somewhere around at this venue giving talks. And also on the prediction markets offering that Gnosis was working on before. But since the beginning of this year, I'm fully focusing on our decentralized exchange protocol, which launched in May, and that was basically exactly the time where we also were speaking with the Balancer team about them integrating our CowSwap protocol. And since then we have been working on it, and now it's finally live, which is amazing, and glad to be here and talk about it a bit more.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I'm Jeremy, head of growth at Balancer Labs. I've been on the team for a year, and much of my time is spent working on really high-value integrations with other projects in the ecosystem, such as Gnosis and Anna's team. This is one that I've been very excited about for a while. So, very, very happy to share this with you and to bring this new technical solution available to retail traders, institutional traders, DeFi protocols. I think this is we're going to be discussing why this is a game changer and how it's going to be a really valuable tool for all of you.
Nice. You can jump right into it, Jeremy. What is the Gnosis Balancer protocol?
Yeah, so this is the integration of CowSwap, which, in my opinion, and I know in a lot of people's opinion in the space, it's really the best user experience for DEX trading in all of DeFi. I love it. I love the product. It's got tons of benefits, which we'll probably dive into, but it's essentially the integration of CowSwap into the Balancer protocol, so that every trade that you make through Balancer's front end is just the same as if you were making it through CowSwap. You get the best available price, not only on Balancer, but across all DEXs. You also get to trade without needing to have any ETH in your wallet, because you don't have to pay gas in ETH. You can pay gas in the tokens that you're trading, actually. And sort of a lot of features which Anna and I will get into that just make the whole experience a lot nicer for users.
Yeah, perfect. Anna, if you can jump a bit deeper into it, and specifically what is the cow part and how does it work and why is it so valuable?
Absolutely, would love to. Maybe just like to add a little bit on the high level of how the two protocols are now being integrated with each other. Exactly what Jeremy was saying. So Balancer has now per default integrated CowSwap. So any one of you going to the Balancer user interface, you're placing a trade, it will be channeled via CowSwap. But then also from the CowSwap side of things, we have also integrated the Balancer protocol more tightly, meaning that any transactions, if there's single transactions that we want to settle on the Balancer pools because they have the best price across all on-chain liquidity, then we are saving the users also some gas costs, because we can directly send the transaction, settle the transaction in the Balancer pools without having to send the transaction through our settlement contract. So there's additional price benefits from this integration. Sorry, now getting to your question about
the cow part. What is CowSwap?
CowSwap is essentially, I think the easiest way to describe it is that it's a meta DEX aggregator. So CowSwap is tackling a lot of different problems. One that is quite known is, or hopefully all of you have at least come across it, is the maximum extractable value, MEV, which has been one of the biggest topics arising this year. It's essentially the possibility for external parties to extract value from your trades. So whenever you trade on wherever you do a Uniswap, MetaMask, or wherever, you usually define a slippage to ensure that your trade is being executed. And the higher the slippage you set, the more value can be extracted for you, because this slippage is exploitable. And CowSwap has multiple layers of ensuring that the slippage doesn't get extracted from the end user. Happy to talk about this in a little bit more detail, maybe to keep on the high level advantages that CowSwap delivers. This is one. And that is uniquely done. No other protocol does it in the way that CowSwap does it. But also, nowadays, if you as a trader, you try to find the best on-chain execution path, there is already existing DEX aggregators, right? There's already 1inch, Paraswap, Matcha. But we have realized that not always each of them offers the best price, because it's still a question of which ERC20 token are you swapping against, which one at what point in time, that not always, they don't always deliver the same solution. So we essentially are aggregating those aggregators as well. We also have direct tight integration into any existing on-chain liquidity, but again, also these DEX aggregators. So if Matcha, whichever one offers the best price, your trades would still be channeled there. But we have some statistics on this, and I think about 30% of trades usually get the best price on Matcha, but then 20% maybe on Paraswap. So you can tell that it's not always the one DEX aggregator that would offer you the best one. If you go to CowSwap, you ensure you will always get the best price. And then, yeah, some of the advantages that Jeremy mentioned from the UX side of things. As a user, if your transaction fails, you don't pay for it. Also, you pay you're not basically what you do is you're signing a transaction, so you don't have to pay transaction costs in ETH. If your trade gets executed successfully, you're paying basically in the ERC20 token that you are swapping, not in Ether. And then there's a bunch of other advantages, but maybe, I don't know, to make it more interesting, happy for you to mix it up.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's really interesting that two protocols have decided to collaborate on making something that's better. How has this partnership come together, and kind of are there any highlights in that kind of interaction between two big organizations?
Yeah, I would say Gnosis and Balancer teams have had close relationship for a long time. I think that we have a mutual respect for sort of the focus on both sides on quality and on engineering. It's kind of like what we both have sort of a tech-first culture, less concerned with creating hype, more concerned with creating real value and creating real innovation that moves the space forward and provides something unique that doesn't already exist. So I think it was a very natural fit for us to work together on this. We on the Balancer side, we saw this as an opportunity to provide the best user experience possible, and that can even mean that sometimes Balancer itself would not always capture all of the value of the trade. For example, as Anna described, when you trade on Balancer today, we want you to have the best user experience, and we want you to get the best possible price. In a lot of cases, that best possible price will be settled on Balancer because of because of the design of the protocol, because of our single vault architecture, which allows very low cost trades in between pools on the Balancer protocol. But if it's not on Balancer, we still want you to get the best price, and we're allowing that to happen anywhere in DeFi, wherever it's best for the user.
Yeah, maybe to add from my end, I think really if you look in the DEX space, there hasn't been so many strong innovations lately, right? I mean, you have, of course, the concentrated liquidity market maker, but other than that, the DEX space hasn't evolved that much anymore recently. And then you have a Balancer team that I think has always struck us as one of the really strong teams in terms of developer capability. And Balancer V2 is a very strong product. I mean, this was very innovative to launch with the single vault. At the same time, CowSwap is also bringing new innovation to the DEX space because we really bring this new batch layer that doesn't really exist anywhere else, right? So essentially what happens on CowSwap is that multiple users' trades that can be batched together to give users a better price in the end. So what we do is if there's, for example, one user trading USDC for DAI and someone else DAI for USDC, they can be directly swapped against each other. But there's also other advantages if multiple people want to do the same trade of selling DAI for USDC, for example. We batch them together and channel it on-chain, which means that we only use a single transaction. So if you look at numbers, for example, like how much savings can we make for users, just looking at gas costs, for example, I would say like a general Uniswap trade, of course it always depends what kind of token you're swapping, but let's say a standard ERC20 token that you're swapping on Uniswap incurs about 130K in gas. In CowSwap, we can bring down the price for the end user to 70K. So there is significant savings in that already. And basically, summing it up, I think Balancer and CowSwap in their own ways really bring new innovation to DeFi. And for us, it was just a logical fit to see if we could collaborate on this. And it makes a lot of sense because, Balancer has the liquidity pools. We are building a DEX that is tapping into on-chain liquidity. So it was, really a natural fit for us to work on this together to get ultimately better prices for the end users.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to see how two DAOs are coming together to really find the best possible value for the end user. Now, zooming a little bit more into this kind of partnership, how do you think that something like this could scale across even larger within these DAOs or within multiple DAOs Do you see that this is something that you could do with 10 or 15 different organizations, or is it something specifically to this partnership alone?
So it depends. So this very tight collaboration where we basically essentially are able to directly send single transactions to Balancer. I think this is a very unique partnership in that way. However, of course, the CowSwap protocol can be integrated by multiple external parties. And actually, for the use case of DAOs, it makes a lot of sense. For example, everyone who has done a multi-sig trade in their life, they know it's quite time-consuming to collect the signatures of whoever your co-founders or whoever you're sharing the safe with. And it's exactly the same situation for a DAO. I mean, actually, a lot of DAOs are using the Gnosis Safe today. And so what happens is, if you want to use a DAO for, if you want to make a trade on your treasury, usually it takes quite a long time until your trade is submitted, because it takes so much time until your co-signer has co-signed the transaction. So what happens is that you have a high probability that your trade will fail, because by the time that it would be executed, the on-chain prices have changed. The one way to avoid this is that you set a ridiculously high slippage, but then you get yourself prone to MEV extraction. And I don't know, for example, we were looking in MetaMask trades the other day, because they are just using that as an example, because they have a default slippage of 3%. And there was one trade that we came across that lost in one single transaction more than 7 Ether. So this is definitely something that you do want to avoid, right? And so what CowSwap does is always at the time, so if you as a user, you're not committing to a trading path. All that you're signing is the sell token, the buy token, your limit price, and then the duration until when you want this trade to expire. And then what happens is, by the point in time that your co-signer co-signs the transaction, then the solvers, which is basically the executing arm of CowSwap, that are looking at the transactions that are in the order book, see how they can batch them together, and then looking at what's the best possible way of executing those on chain. These entities, these solvers, they will look at what is the current price point on chain that is needed to execute your price. So if you define the slippage of 3%, they won't submit your trade with the 3% slippage, but instead they will see, okay, only 0.7% slippage is necessary. They will add 0.1% slippage just to make sure, because you never know what's going to happen. And then they will submit this. So you're essentially making sure that the remaining 2.2 or 2.3, whatever is taken, cannot be executed by external parties due to sandwiching you. And I think that's because you brought up the DAO use case, that just came to mind, that especially for those who are running a DAO or using a safe multisig, this is probably the best user experience in terms of DEX trading that you can have.
I've been there. Anything to add, Jeremy?
Yeah, I would just kind of add from another angle that I think a lot of people, who are familiar with Balancer are aware that, it's a decentralized exchange. Might also be aware of the fact that it's an automated portfolio manager, it's an asset management platform. But really beyond both of those things, it's a platform for development. The Balancer is designed to, be a platform for the most flexible, customizable liquidity pools. And because of that flexibility, because of that customizability, the use cases that you can create by different configurations of liquidity pools on Balancer is infinite. So this integration with CowSwap doesn't only bring value to traders and users of Balancer interface, the CowSwap interface. It also brings value to all of the projects that are integrated with Balancer, that are tapping into the liquidity Balancer, that are using trade functionality on Balancer. This is going to provide further benefits for the ecosystem in a much larger way as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, we're about to run out of time. Anna, anything that's coming up for CowSwap that's really exciting you want to share?
Oh. Many exciting things are coming up. I'm not sure how much I want to.
Just a little bit of alpha.
Well, I did mention that we're doing our spin-off, so that's something that we're heavily working on. Definitely worthwhile to check out ColorSwap. There's going to be a profile page launching that also gives people the opportunity to share a direct link to the product. And then we will be tracing how much volume is generated. But yeah, like there's a lot of fun features coming up. The safe integration is going live very soon as well. So actually, like a lot of things are ready. We just didn't launch them this week because everyone is busy here at Lisbon. But next week we have a couple of nice announcements and launches coming up.
Wonderful, thank you. What about you, Jeremy? What's coming up for Balancer?
What's coming up for Balancer? So we've been working on a really interesting, innovative new feature that I can't tell you about right now, but we're announcing it on Thursday at LizCon. So if you'll be there, yeah, come and listen. It's pretty cool. I would say at this point in time, like Balancer is gaining so much traction with really high quality projects in DeFi that are integrating and building on top of Balancer. Fade Protocol is building their V2 on Balancer. We have the team from PowerPool here who's building on Balancer. I mean, we have teams building custom AMMs within Balancer, such as Element Finance and Gyroscope and more. The design space is very, very wide, and I think that the product market fit in many different places is kind of clicking into place. So it's a very exciting time for Balancer now.
Nice, thank you so much. Are you both speaking at LizCon?
I am. Are you?
No, we didn't get a talk.
You didn't get a talk, so only Jeremy. All right. Thank you all so much. That's it. We're good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that lively conversation. And now let me introduce Wrench from Prime DAO. Awesome, fantastic. A warm welcome for Wrench, please.
No, like an HDMI. Do we have the project? Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'm duplicating right now. Let me see. By extending that. Again. Perfect. Thanks, man. Cheers. All right. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Everything okay? Can you hear me well? Good? Perfect. Welcome. My name is Wrench. I am the product manager at Curve Labs, and Curve Labs is the development squad of Prime DAO. Super excited to be here. I'm seeing some familiar faces from Paris, some new faces from Lisbon. All of you guys are welcome. Really appreciate everybody's time, everybody's contribution to this ecosystem. And keeping that in mind, I prepared a very, very, very light presentation. It's not even a presentation, it's just like 3 or 4 slides, because I really wanted this to be more of a dialogue, of a conversation, rather than just me coming up here and speaking about something. And I do believe that you guys are the right people. This is the right audience to address these issues. Today we're going to talk about realizing a DAO-to-DAO future. And for that, the talk is basically divided into 2 parts. The first part, we're going to be looking into a little trip down the memory lane, and we'll go back to 2018 and understand how we really ended up talking about DAO-to-DAO collaborations. And then we're going to understand, why does this matter, especially from a cultural perspective. And then at the second part, there's going to be a world premiere of the new application that we're working on called Prime Deals, which we're super, super excited to show you. So before really jumping into the meat of the subject, I want to take a step back and understand how did we arrive here? How can we talk about DAO-to-DAO collaboration? And for that, we go back to 2018, where Genesis DAO, the first functional DAO in Ethereum, and this phrase comes with a little disclaimer where we basically ignore the Tower of Babylon event that's kind of happened before that. And Genesis DAO was formed, and they had a vision. They had a vision of becoming this new organization that was fun, that is fluid in coordination, that is experimental, that is fair. And for that, they had an idea that's called DAO fractionalization. And basically with DAO fractionalization, they didn't want us to have one meta body governing every single thing, but they wanted to have smaller DAOs that would bring more composability, more agility, more collaboration, and more coordination to the whole ecosystem. And of course, in 2018, due to lack of tooling, due to immaturity of the ecosystem, this idea didn't really flourish. But the main point was perfect, which was not seeing DAOs as these isolated, secluded nodes, but more of them seeing them as networked islands. Because just as networked islands in history, even though they seem isolated, they're actually the catalysts for trade and cultural exchange. And this is what we need to be mindful about. Ever since 2018, when DAOs was first come to life, they always meant to collaborate and always meant to coordinate. Understanding that, in my previous talk, I mentioned that, as DAOs, we have this claim, we have this vision of being the future of organizations. But in order to be future of organizations, we first need to outperform the legacy versions. And Patrick, he has a great article called Ownership in Crypto Networks, where he basically dives deep into equity and equity's role in governance. And he basically finds out that the world as we know it is basically owned by banking organizations who have ownership in each other. This is a visualization of global corporate control network emphasized by ownership, where you can clearly see the agents in this game, they tend to coordinate and collaborate with each other rather than compete with each other. And this is the kind of coordination game that made them too big to fail and helped them basically control the majority of the world. And, unfortunately for us, we have different ideologies, we have different ambitions, everybody in this room, everybody in this space. We don't really see eye to eye with these institutions. And there's a great quote by Beer Stafford, who is the godfather of Project Cybersyn and cybernetics, where he perfectly summarizes what happened with these institutions. And let's read that together. He says, "The institutions we have built to operate that economy, to safeguard ourselves, have all grown into large and powerful pieces of social machinery, which suddenly seem not so much protective as actually threatening." And there's an emphasis on social machinery here. So understanding where we are with these institutions, what we have to ask ourselves is that how can we facilitate this coordination and collaboration over competition soul and facilitate co-ownership relationships? And that is where a very important factor comes into play, which is culture. In order to understand how we can outperform the legacy versions, we need to understand where we're at from a cultural perspective in centralized and decentralized institutions. And we will take the next couple of minutes to kind of compare those two and really dive a little bit deeper here. So we have basically two sets of institutions. We have centralized institutions, which are basically inspired by the industrial era and the machine, and which are basically control mechanisms. And on the other side, we have responsive and adaptive systems, which are inspired by the regenerative era and the life itself. And both of these institutions have certain characteristics that are very, very significant to them. Starting with the centralized institutions. The centralized institutions, they tend to be linear in thinking. They tend to focus on cause and effect. They tend to focus on prediction. And they tend to be masculine dominant. They tend to be, addressing the left hemisphere of the brain. And overall, the ideas, the goals and aims of centralized institutions, they're always centralized around the individual and the ego. While on the other side, we have a system that doesn't think linearly, but we think interconnected, and we don't really care about cause and effect because we design systems that sense and respond and then fluctuate and be agile according to the input of the system. And at the same time, we don't really care about, gender, because what matters to us is the participation of the agents. And at the same time, we don't really have anything to do with the ego or individual, and our goals are always centered around the ecosystem and the ecology that we're living in. So, understanding this comparison, the challenge we have in our hands is how do we take what made the centralized institutions so great, and how do we ground it with Web3 values, which are, open source, which are desire and transparency, which are community, self-sovereignty, open access financially to everyone, rather than just having this, extremely permissioned system that, most of the institutions are stuck in. And there's a great part in Kia's article called Prehistory of DAOs, where she perfectly phrases this as well, and she says, by embracing cooperativism as a protocol rather than a corporate structure, DAOs can emerge a new cultural space where we can outperform the traditional divisions. And it's really key to understand that in this non-monopolistic nature of DAOs, we have so much leverage to have shared use in knowledge, in resource, in talent, in everything that we can imagine. And in Prime DAO, we understand, the historical nature of Genesis DAO and what they had envisioned, and we understand, this unique cultural opportunity that we have in hand, and we want to make DAO to DAO a real thing. And for that, it has been a long journey, and that journey started with an intense research period where we collaborated with the folks at Block Science, and we asked, certain questions. How do these DAOs actually collaborate? Like, what do they do? If they want to collaborate, what does the architecture look like? What does the tech stack look like? And all of those questions then created a sprint of development and basically specification, where Marvin from our backend team and his team called ByteRocket, they took over the smart contract architecture, and in parallel, we ran UX and UI workshops intensively for a couple of weeks, and we adopted this agile development methodology where we did not just put our head down and designed, but we actually went out there, we sent out diplomats to other DAOs, such as Olympus, such as Tokamak, and we tried to understand their needs, how do they want to collaborate, and we basically created this application to address those needs, which I'm going to give you a small demo right now. While we switch to the demo, I will start with the name, which is Prime Deals. And with Prime Deals, with the name, we want to take something long and exhaustive, such as DAO to DAO collaboration, and we wanted to make it something straightforward, which is actually two or more DAOs coming together and try to make a deal with each other. And here, this is the homepage, and we're going to dive into the running deals. Now, the navigation in this application is solely going to depend on what the user wants to do, but the running deals is a great part to start, and I do believe that it's going to be the most interesting for everybody in the audience. Basically, running deals is two or more DAOs having an idea of a collaboration and having an active negotiation about it, either rejecting it or accepting it, and at the end, they're going to have an on-chain execution of a token swap, and token swap is going to be the first module that this application is going to support. But I want you to keep in mind that this application is going to support the whole journey of this DAO-to-DAO collaboration. So starting from matchmaking, the negotiation process, and the on-chain execution. If we go to the running deals page, we'll see the title of the deal, a description of the deal, and on the right-hand side, you start seeing some functionalities. We'll start with the fork deal, because sticking true to the blockchain nature, if you like something, you don't have to create it from scratch, and you can fork a deal that kind of looks appealing to you. And we have reject deal, edit deal, accept deal, and negotiate. And this is the visualization from a DAO representative perspective. So there's going to be different user groups that are using this application. One of them is the most important one is the DAO representative, where basically it will be impossible to have every single member of a DAO try to make a deal with every single member of another DAO, but we still have DAO representatives who can basically speak on behalf of the DAO and take decisions on behalf of the DAO. So these DAO representatives, they come here, they accept, they reject, or negotiate a deal, and we have on the right-hand side a voting mechanism, again, not for the whole DAO, but for the DAO representatives to come and vote on this deal. And it's a 3 out of 5 mechanism, so basically, if 3 representatives give it a go, they can move on to the on-chain execution part. And we have, deal information. DAO 1 gives X amount of tokens. DAO 2 receives X amount of tokens. At the left-hand side, we have deal clauses. And this was actually a feedback given to us from a DAO that we were working with. And they told us, it's not just about the on-chain execution itself, but it's also about the soft agreements that goes into this deal. I will talk about your brand in a certain way, or our community will engage with your brand with your community in a certain way. And those clauses will be listed here. And furthermore, if these DAO representatives would like to negotiate on these clauses, we have a discuss section. It's kind of like a forum where these DAO representatives can come in and have these back and forwards within this application. And this is built in a Web3 native way using Ceramic as a tool. And this is the running deals part. Now, if you go to open deals, this is basically a market for deals where a DAO can come in without having to find a counterpart and basically provide a deal for the whole market to take on. I will swap X amount of tokens with a person who agreed to this clause, and a person can come in and accept this deal or not. And, we can let our imagination run quite wild with this, and it can be an abundance of opportunity for everybody involved. I will quickly run you through how you actually initiate a deal and how you submit a deal. It's very, very simple. You come in, and first you have two options. It's going to be either a token swap or joint venture. We're going to go live with token swap, and then a joint venture will be added, where basically 2 or more DAOs within this application can come in and form a new entity who can support a new goal and a new aim. If you choose token swap, basically you can fill out your proposal, you can go to deal details, you can select your DAO, you can put your token address, you can state your clauses, you can state your terms, and then you can submit your deal. Now, we talked about 2 modules so far, which is token swaps and joint ventures. We're also going to be supporting co-liquidity, where basically 2 or more DAOs would like to create a liquidity pool, likely through Balancer, and they can do that within this application. And we're also going to be supporting co-farming. So once you create a liquidity pool, you can create farming mechanisms using this application, and everything can be done with one platform. And at the same time, we want you guys to imagine that this architecture is built in a way to support 2 or more DAOs making a deal, swapping 2 or more tokens at the same time. So we really have an ambition of seeing a sophisticated deal in this ecosystem where, 4 DAOs come together and they can swap, 3 or more tokens with each other. We also have another project that is adjacent to this called the Proposal Inverter, and that is currently being developed, and it's going to be out soon, and it's super exciting, and it's actually being true to the nature of DAO-to-DAO collaboration. There's different squads that are participating in it. So to wrap things up, we understand that, historically, DAOs were always meant to collaborate, and we understand that there's a unique cultural opportunity in this space to outperform the legacy versions and really create something that's going to touch many, many lives. And as Prime DAO, we are building a very cool product to address these things. So if you want to chat about it, please come and talk to me. If you want to reach out to me, please use these handles. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy the after party.
French, thank you so much for that talk. Would you like to take any questions? Or
of course, if there are any questions, I would love to take questions.
Sure. 1 second.
Thank you. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about the decision to make it really based on representatives. It seems very non-DAO to me. I mean, I understand that many DAOs are still, or DAOs are still not very much a DAO yet, are in that process of decentralization and so on. And elections is a very common primitive of the space. So effectively, a DAO could run kind of like a sort of pre-approval and elect someone, perhaps with some constraints or something. But other than in a fairly like early stage of decentralization, how do you actually envision this working, let's say, for an Uniswap sort of DAO or something like that?
That's a great question. We actually have not taken any of these decisions ourselves. This was, as I said, a collaboration with different DAOs. Like, we went out there and we asked them, like, how do you guys do this right now? Like, and they said, there's a person who's responsible for, it's a business person or a DAO diplomat or however you want to call it, and they go and they dive into the forums or telegrams or discords of these people and they try to connect with their counterparts. So even though I understand your question that this DAO representative seems a bit like anti-decentralization from a concept perspective, this is how it is right now. And this is just a tool to kind of facilitate it. But in the end, there was actually a very inspirational workshop over there that, in the end, hopefully, this can evolve into communities engaging directly with each other in a non-chaotic way, in a beautifully chaotic way, and we won't need these, middle DAO representatives. As we move towards, next iterations and next versions, we will keep on changing the platform accordingly, and hopefully the ecosystem will grow towards what you're envisioning, and, we would love to support that idea.
Great. Thank you very much, Lorenz, for your talk.
Thank you, guys.
Warm applause for him. And please let's give a warm welcome to Jonathan from OnFund. Hope I pronounced that correctly.
I think it's okay. Hey everyone, I'm Yoni from OnFund. OnFund is like a collective of investors and founders that aim to support the creator economy. And today I want to speak about going from value locked to user engaged, which I think it's the biggest paradigm shift that we see in crypto. And the change is we're starting to having real users in crypto that are using dApps and then what it means for the future. So until now, Oh, it's not. One second. Okay, so OnFund is a DAO that aims to support these kind of applications, and we are basically doing it with like on the base layer with investment, but also developing internal products in order to try to help the industry grow. So, what are the challenges from our point of view in this new paradigm? One challenge is how to measure the value of those applications. So until now, measuring the value used to be, measuring the value locked, measuring how much money was paid by fees or stuff like that. And right now that you have a lot of users, we need to measure these things differently. So how do you measure user engagement is a real question that not a lot of people know yet. And so this is one kind of challenge that we are after. And the second challenge is how to help those applications to get users, because users is what they need and not liquidity like they used to want before. And so users becoming more valuable. The users are the new liquidity. And right, so on the base layer, we already did like about 11 or 12 investments, and we are doing many others in this growing space of social applications, which include games, DAOs, and social networks, and also social graphs. But the interesting part is two ventures that we are doing internally, one called DAOPOS, which I will talk about now, and one is OCG. So for OCG is basically like a prediction market where creators are locking tokens and try to predict like future social metrics that will be in the platform, and then they go and actually do it by themselves. So in that way, we can help social applications to get more users and pay for that in tokens if there was something achieved, like more views, more users doing specific tasks, etc. So we are going to launch it in I think a week or two. We already have the smart contract. It's very similar to how Augur works, but in this case, it's not betting. It's actually getting the people, the creators, to do these kind of things and to make the result that they are betting on. So this is one effort that we are doing. And the second effort called DAOPOS. And DAOPOS is very interesting in my opinion. I'm biased, but so what it should be a dashboard and a research portal that basically indicates user engagement metrics. So currently it's almost impossible to know user engagement metrics in crypto, and when you're asking like what are users? Users are voters, users are participate in Discord, users are people that have the token, and then like what is engagement as well? People that vote, people that lock the token, people that participate. So there is a lot of those open questions, and we are starting from a very basic table that indicates, the base layer of participants in Discord, and then on top of it, voters' participation and full-time contributors' participation, and starting to think about other ways like, how much time people log the tokens, how loyal they are, how sticky they are, and try to get those parameters to predict, the value of those projects. So if you have any insights, I'd love to speak with you about that. So this is the second project that we are doing. And yeah, this is more on the DAOPOS side of things, finding new parameters. Also getting the data is very hard because off-chain data is almost not available. On-chain data is easy, but on-chain data is financial. And then we think how to get data that is not financial, so it's not on-chain. the only thing that is on chain and is social is how much time people log and very few things. But most of the things are not on chain, and it's hard to get the data. But we are going there. But currently, it's very very early in the data availability front. So basically how to join on-fund initiatives. Investors can join our community. We are sharing SPV deals and for some, if people are accepted by other members, then they can be members. And for creators, we're with the OCG giving an opportunity to earn tokens for valuable contribution of content and other things. And if you are a researcher or data scientist, you are definitely invited to come and contribute a post or join the team of DAOist. And that's it. So if everyone have a question or something.
Jonathan, do you want to ask yourself a good question? Sorry, I'm back.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you for the presentation. Where can we contribute to OCG, and also what kind of contributions are you looking for?
So OCG, we are going to launch in about 2 weeks, and basically we're looking for two sides of the marketplace. One side is projects that are willing to give tokens in exchange for measurable results. So for example, willing to construct a campaign that will say if we'll get X amount of users, we will pay X amount of tokens, and that's what we're willing to give. And then that's one side, and the other side is basically content creators that are very willing to take risk and basically do a free work, but take a risk that they will not be able to make this change happen. And so it's usually very high tier creators. So on both sides we are looking for people to contribute.
Thank you.
Hey, Yoni, thanks for the presentation. So what are the first parameters that On.Fund is looking for in the creator economy? Is there some sort of, where do you see value for those communities getting built, and what do you think are going to be the main pillars or guidance?
So you're asking about the first parameters for DAOist or
for generation of value in the content creator economy? So for this new DAOs coming up and the creators, where do you think it's value is going to be extracted from?
Yes. So, the main thing that is valuable is how loyal is the community, and how loyal, how active are engaged, and then how do you measure that? So, in the first step, we are going to do a base layer of a Discord participation and growth, and then on top of it, full-time contributors, how much money they are getting, and then voters, data, how much people are voting, if they are becoming more and more active, and then later we are adding stuff how likely people to hodl, how the growth of the token holders communities is growing, and this kind of on-chain data that also reflects on the value of the community. So we are doing now a report on Olympus DAO because they are a very, very good community, and that is the first parameters that we're checking, but really it's not final. It's very nascent kind of research field. So.
Thanks.
Hi, Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask, with creators, I think, kind of being reached out to in so many different ways as part of being part of Web3, like they have an opportunity to create their own social token, they have opportunity to work just with other creators and a whole bunch of other ways. Is the intent to kind of create a community of creators to be able to help them launch platforms themselves, to be able to then become almost investors in the platform too, or how are you thinking about kind of really reeling them in?
Yeah, like, the reason we started OnFi in the beginning was that we understand that the value of money is going down and the value of users is going up. So you see, like, a good example is YGG. YGG becoming one of the most valuable investors in the gaming space. Why? Because they are bringing a community of users with them. So I feel that, that to have this user, this ability to get users is super valuable. That's what gives investors value. Otherwise, money becoming very abundant. And what we're trying to build with OCG is to enable, is to be valuable, as a marketplace by building it, but basically enable top tier creators to earn tokens, similar way that YGG players are earning tokens for playing games. Then, like top tier creators, content creators, all kind of content creators can make tokens by doing a good job that have actual results. And I feel that that's what projects need. Like they need, traction users. Same thing with what happened with the internet. Measuring the value of applications based on MAU, DAO, and all these kind of things based on users. In the end of the day, and in crypto, we're just starting this phase of measuring users as an indicator of value. So I feel that the people that will help applications get more users are will be the most valuable kind of investors. So that's what we're trying to do with OCG, like to be like YGG for social networks.
Okay, great, Jonathan. Thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Up next, we have a DAO panel with Brink, Autonomy, and Gelato. I'm trying to find the speakers, so if you bear with me 2 minutes, we'll be right back for our last but not least talk of the day.
Right now, one more. Just one more. There he is. Yep. Okay.
instead. Standing panel. Good exercise. Check. Oh.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us and for sticking around for the last talk. I think we have a great panel today. We're going to be talking about automation on blockchain. So this is a concept some of you might not be familiar with, but hopefully we'll get to that. Before we get started, I do want to introduce all of our panelists. So I'll just introduce you all, and then if you could share, just a couple sentences about your background and what you're working on. So to start us off, we have Mike.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike Calvanese. I'm CEO and co-founder of Brink. We are working on decentralized automation, which we're going to talk all about in this panel.
Hey, I'm James, founder of Autonomy Network, and I've been working on the project for most of the year now at this point. Just generally been a DeFi degen for a few years before this, worked on a bunch of crypto projects, but yeah, super obsessed in this space.
Hey guys, I'm Louis from Gelato. We've been around for a while, automating DeFi and everything layer 1, layer 2. Also just promoting and pushing forth the decentralized future of Ethereum applications.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Before we get started, I do want to say I do work with Mike, so I'm on the Brink team, but of course there's going to be no bias here, and I'm going to obviously give everyone the opportunity to answer questions. Just to get started, Louis, do you mind explaining what do you think automation means in this context for folks that might not be familiar?
So automation is by no means a new thing, right? Like Web 2 is completely automated. Probably everybody uses software as a service applications every day that are completely automated. For me, one way to describe automation is just basically stuff that runs on a server. The only difference with Web 3 is that you can't give away your keys anymore. Like that would break with the core tenets of Web 3, right? Like not your keys, not your crypto. So basically, automation in the context of Web 3 is using servers to automate and improve user experience without requiring the user to give away their keys or their data, basically.
Awesome. And I should add, if any one of you wants to jump onto any questions, please feel free to do so. Mike, do you want to go ahead and share, could you explain how the network actually is designed to function? I know there are 3 differences in how the mechanics of each product works, and perhaps all of you can touch on that. But Mike, do you want to start and explain Brink?
Sure, yeah. And just to kind of add to what Louis said about just what we're talking about when we say automation, like there is, obviously you mentioned like the non-custodial aspect where, for a Web3 system, it has to be you're not giving up custody of your keys and your funds. But also, in the context of these networks, they are like decentralized and obviously like something that is talked about all the time. Like you could build a non-custodial centralized service, but in the exactly, that's quite easy to do compared to building a network that is actually truly decentralized, where you have kind of open execution of automation tasks. When we talk about automation networks, we're really talking about decentralized automation networks.
Awesome. James, and do you want to explain how your network functions as well? Or?
Sure. I think all 3 of us are relatively similar in the sense that there's like a decentralized network of bots, monitoring some source of like requests or tasks, I think you guys call them. And like once these conditions are filled, the request is executed. We try to make it pretty modular so that like once one use case is deployed, for example, like a UniV2 fork, any other UniV2 fork doesn't even need to deploy any contracts. They just need to make a UI change. But I think generally we all, there's a network of bots monitoring something and like triggering executions in a way that's like trustless or permissionless.
And do you want to briefly share the incentive mechanism there? So just to recap, these bots are constantly monitored to see if they can fulfill the user's signed requirements of what they need to receive, and then what's in it for the actual executor.
So in our case, the user pays a bounty to the executing bot. We do it based on gas, so 10 to 30% extra of the gas cost that it took to execute, because obviously they need to compensate the executor. Otherwise, the executor would just be like spending money, which no one's going to do that. plus this extra 10 to 30% as an incentive. It's basically the same like tokenomics as like Bitcoin transaction fees or ETH transaction fees. The kind of network has this like revenue almost.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. Just when we're talking about like kind of incentives, like ultimately users have to pay fees. So the user does have to pay for the cost of something to be executed. But the way that can be done through these networks is like more abstracted than like just user pays gas directly, which is what we're kind of used to with most dApps. I think all three of us are building kind of like an abstraction of that, where the fee is paid potentially in like a different token, not necessarily an ETH, and also would be paid when your order is executed. So that's kind of a really interesting property of these networks.
Gotcha. And I understand Gelato is, of course, the only project with a token right now, and you have plans to incorporate your token for the executor role. Can you speak about that a bit?
Yeah, so we did plan to roll out a token, I think, ever since we started. It just took our time with it. Obviously, we started in 2019. Probably wasn't like the best time for tokens back then. It was always the plan to basically have it so that executors can permissionlessly join and execute tasks in the system. And while every integration that uses Gelato to automate its functions should be written in a secure way, there's usually still some integrations where there's like a margin for exploit or greedy behavior by the bot. And I think here the token is just the perfect coordination tool for bots to just stake, to prove their reputation and their honesty in the system, and to be punished if they somehow misbehave. In the future, I think it would be ideal if this is also completely automated, but I think up until that point, the Gelato DAO will step in and play this role of the arbitrator basically for bots and govern them and make sure that the ones that are actually misbehaving get slashed. So I think the token is really key here.
Gotcha, thank you. So I think we've explained to the audience that a user can submit an order and then bots monitor that to see if they can fulfill that, and when they can fulfill that, they execute it. I'd love to get a sense of what you all think are the short-term best use cases for this type of automation. We could just go down the line, starting with Mike.
Sure, yeah. We talk about this all the time, but limit orders and stop-loss orders, I think, there are systems that have been around for a while that do limit orders already. 0x relays, I think SushiSwap has a limit order system they built. But stop-loss orders are not something that's like really common to see DeFi native. I think you guys, Gelato, built some stop-loss order automation, which is really cool, but it's still, I think that's like a big use case that we hear a lot. And then there's obviously others, but I'll let you guys talk about those.
Yeah, I mean, I think the DEX stuff is kind of the obvious first place for everyone. It's just such a high value, high frequency use case that's just like very obviously needed. Not just like limit orders, but stop losses, like ways to prevent impermanent loss, like doing the automatic management in like UniB3, like Gelato's doing. I think certainly DEXs, like liquidations are valuable, but like the frequency that happens is just like way less. So I mean, DEXs is 100%. But I think the market's just so big that it's literally not possible for like either one of us to like eat it up independently. I mean, like Gelato had a few months head start, it's just not like they haven't even like got into like the Avalanche ecosystem, and like we haven't got into the Phantom ecosystem. I think the way that this is going to play out like in the DEX space is just like we'll each kind of grab sort of like territories of like blockchains and like won't even be like competing against each other for like at least like 6 to 12 months, and like after that point we'll probably be competing, but it's just so incredibly early in like in this space right now that it's basically open season.
Yeah, so in terms of the top use cases that I see, obviously limit orders and so on were a no-brainer from the start. I just sucked using Uniswap in real time, right? That sucks. So I think what we will see like a lot more of is automation between side chains or like layer 1s, layer 2s obviously there's like so many, like Avalanche, BSC, you name them, right? Like so many of them, and they need to be more seamlessly integrated. So I think that's like the biggest area for automation probably for the next year or so, or maybe even more. So cross-chain automation, and then in general, like a lot of DevOps tasks, like we have so many developers that just want to automate very simple things. Like it's not even B2C. This is like more like, you know, a Circle CI for Web3 or something what we're building here, where you as a developer can come to our PokeMe interface and simply schedule like, you know, cron jobs for, I don't know, calling this function once a day to harvest or calling this function once a day to claim your rewards. We have a lot of these use cases. Someone built a petting service for Aavegotchis. No one saw it coming, but that was like the leader for quite some time on transactions. So yeah, I think it can be extremely simple. Like definitely Gelato had a focus on building extremely complex stuff for quite some time, but we see a lot of value with the really simple dumb things as well. And actually that's where a lot of the joy is too. So yeah. Shout out to Aavegotchi and Gotchi Care.
Awesome. So I think you've touched on it a bit, but I think none of you three probably envision the future of automation to be just these conditional orders. So thinking 5 to 10 years out, what do you think these automation platforms will look like? And going a step forward, do you think the average user will be interacting directly with the blockchain on, say, Uniswap, or will they be using an automation platform to handle that? We could start with you, Lewis, and then just work our way back.
Yeah. So I think that first of all, in the future, I think that most of the financial world and you know, with NFTs and so on, like a lot other like more spaces in the web will completely run on smart contracts wherever they will be deployed. And as such, I think that probably 95% or so of these transactions will not be initiated by a human. It's just like smart contract APIs and so on. They're like programs, and they're programs made for programs. And yeah, basically, for me, it's very clear that in 10 years or so, we will see so many more transactions than today on all of these networks. And I feel like everybody, like either specialists but also normal people, will not send transactions themselves, but rather via their bots, via their bot agents, you might call them, in order to be able to compete or like even like just seize windows of opportunity without being restricted by human slowness or sleep or holidays or whatnot, right? So I think for sure Ethereum should, and that's what we're kind of building, right? Like basically enable users to get access to these advanced technologies like bot software and so on, to be able to really like, you know, trade when the moment is right, to pet their gotchis when the moment is right, and all these things. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think most transactions will be automated. I think like in the long term, kind of the ideal thing is for dApps to act as like Web2 like apps where like there's no like signing transactions. Like you just click something and kind of in the background it like automates something, or like makes a transaction, or makes a series of transactions, or sets up some kind of automation. But I think a pretty interesting use case that we are working on at Autonomy is that I think is like very extremely early, and there's basically hardly any market for it right now, but I think is going to grow like massive in the next 5 to 10 years, is like autonomous NFTs and like blockchain gaming and like the whole metaverse area, which we have something coming out on this pretty soon. But essentially like NFTs right now are just basically expensive JPEGs, and like they don't do anything. So if you can automate something in the same way that you can automate like a limit order, you can make something autonomous, like able to make its own transactions essentially. So you can have an NFT that like manages its own portfolio or like trades, or I think they're relatively like boring use cases. I think a much more interesting thing would be like relative to whatever the character of the NFT does. But kind of taking it a step further, which I think is the really interesting stuff, is like one of these autonomous NFTs that actually own themselves. So you can think of them like NPCs, like non-playable characters in games. Because like blockchain games right now, there's a reason that they're mostly PvP, and that's because it's basically impossible to have NPCs. Like blockchains are passive, like you need to interact with them. So without any kind of automation solution, that's what you're limited to forever. And I think without an automation solution, like blockchain gaming would just like forever be like lagging behind like traditional games, like from a feature perspective, because like you just can't get that like complexity and like richness that you can with like NPCs. Like a game like Cyberpunk or Skyrim or something would be literally impossible because they're like single-player games. Like everything's an NPC. But yeah, I think in the long term, this is going to be like much more of a use case. And I think one of the kind of key things that would actually make it better than traditional games, I think is going to cause a phase shift in the next like 5 to 10 years, is like composability aspect. Like NFTs, you can use them in multiple different games, and that's like seeing a bit of use. But I think the key thing is going to be when these NPCs are created and become like widespread. You can interact with the same NPC in multiple different games, and kind of the same way that like CryptoKitties was like it surprised Dapper, the creators, that these cats were used as like a platform, not just as a game. Like people were building like cat hats and cat races and whatever else people built on it. And I think that kind of ability to build is going to lead to these like worlds that are so much more complex than like and rich than like a single like game studio can build. Like, I mean, they have maybe hundreds of employees, but like a world that's interacted with and built on by like millions or billions of people is just going to be just like so much further ahead. And I think that's going to be something that would allow like blockchain gaming to not just be as good as traditional games, but to really like outperform it. But it's still incredibly early. I think it's definitely going to take a while.
Yeah, so obviously we've seen like massive growth of this industry, like DeFi, NFTs, gaming, like just Web3 in general. It's grown so much just in the past few years. But I think it's like definitely still a growing pie. Like we're just seeing the start of this, and I agree with everything you guys are saying. Like there's just so much potential. Obviously, like we're still early days. I think in terms of like automation, I believe that like all of this activity in the future will flow through on an automation network. It makes more sense like for kind of the end user not to be interfacing directly with a blockchain because of like various technical complexity, the fact that you basically have to be a developer, have some kind of like technical capability in order to interface directly. So yeah, all this volume that we're seeing now, like it's still going to be there and it's going to be growing, but we'll see it like basically abstracted to like various layers further above the stack. Like we have obviously like L2s, but we still need automation on L2s. Like L2s work the same way as L1s in terms of transaction submission and complexity and having to pay a gas cost, etc. So yeah, I think what we're building is almost like a new layer, like a layer 3, more or less. It's like an abstraction that's going to help users interact with DeFi liquidity, gaming, like whatever happens on Web3 in the future that we haven't thought of yet, but we'll see happen. So yeah, very exciting.
Great. And before we transition, I saw there were some questions from the audience, so if there are any you want to prepare, please do so now. But we are obviously at a DAO conference. I wanted to ask you all how you're thinking about building out a DAO model to govern your platforms potentially, and how you're engaging the community. I do want to start with Louis because, of course, you just launched a token, and I wanted just to get your initial thoughts on how having that financial incentive there has either helped the community, maybe brought in some new challenges, how it's changed things overall.
So, I mean, it's definitely still very early. The token is in its infancy. It was launched last month, a month ago. But I would say that I'm very excited about the things that we have been dreaming about and planning forever, and that just weren't possible because we didn't have a token. Like as simple as having bot stake in the network and actually having skin in the game, but also we will obviously have a DAO. We will have a snapshot forum. We will have tons of cool votes. Everything from more like system parameters, fees, and so on, up to general things in the gelato verse, right? Like, art competitions. We have a lot of designers in the team who do really nice things, so we want to get a whole vibe going. And I think, the token is the right way to get the people in the community engaged. They've been demanding it. So definitely there are some downsides to a token as well. It can be a lot of distraction. There's people that focus on price that, obviously you don't want to like spend too much time on that, but yeah, there's also definitely a lot of upsides to it, and looking forward to governing the network and spinning out a DAO to actually take this to the future.
Great. Did either of you want to add your thoughts and potential plans to structure a DAO?
I'm really excited about just DAO treasuries and like funding of open source in a way that's like more or less decentralized. I think a lot of those aren't necessarily decentralized, and there needs to be more work to kind of ensure like true decentralization with that model. But I am excited about that model in general. Yeah,
I think for us it's something like we had like staking planned from day one, and actually it's already in our contracts. It's just we just don't have the token live yet, so it's definitely something that's needed. I think we always specifically wanted it to avoid race conditions where executors are trying to execute the same thing, because without some way of like deciding who can execute what, everyone just tries to execute the same thing, and like you end up in these gas wars, and then like front running, and then just like people just stop running bots, and then you end up with a really like unrobust network. So it's something we like planned for from the start, that we like 100% are going to do. Like so it's like actually needed, in these systems. It's not just for the sake of like governance and everything. But we definitely will plan to we do plan to kind of DAOify over time, especially once the token is launched. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you three so much for sharing more about what you're building. I did see we had one question in the back there.
First of all, thank you so much. It's great to see this kind of layer of more automation and kind of simplifying processes coming also to crypto. Essentially, what I get is that to put it in really dumb terms, you're a little bit like the Zapiers and if this then that of crypto. And taking that into account, one of the things that I'm curious about is, where do you see most potential? Do you think it's on the B2B space? Do you think this would be mostly useful for companies who want to automate their assets, or do you think the B2C space would also get a lot from it? And to follow up on that, do you think that we're going to see kind of a bifurcation of the market with some DAOs focusing on B2B and some DAOs focusing on B2C? Thank you.
So I would say that at Gelato we are a bit of B2B2C. So yeah, there's both sides to it for sure. There's a ton of use cases in both camps. I think at the end of the day we have decided to really try to do our best to make improve developer experience. It's very hard. Automation networks are really complex, especially if you want to integrate with them. There's no standardization. A lot of use cases have to be custom integrated in order to work with a bot network like this. And I think as such, the best decision for us was to completely focus on developers first, but the developers that also have good user bases. So at the end of the day, we're always thinking in terms of the end user, what's best for the end user. But the product we're building is geared for or targeted at developers. So I guess B2B if you want.
Yeah, we basically have the same kind of thoughts, and I think it makes more sense when trying to from a biz dev and strategic perspective. If you're kind of B2C, for example, if you're doing limit orders, if you create a DEX with limit orders and stops and whatever, you're essentially competing against all the DEXs, which is just an extremely saturated space. The market's huge, but you're only going to be able to get so far. There's only so much percent of the market you can take. Whereas if you are going to existing DEXs us and Gelato and I think Brinko, it's possible for cumulatively all of us to theoretically at least eat up 100% of the market, and therefore kind of level up DeFi and kind of allow for all these features. So I think there's definitely a use for B2C, and I'm sure it will continue. It's not going to go away, but most of the volume will be through B2B because users shouldn't need to know that we exist. We're a piece of infrastructure. You shouldn't need to know that we exist in order to use this.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We think of what we're building as more or less infrastructure, we think about like the retail market, institutional market. I think ultimately, like, we're probably going to be an infrastructure layer that developers integrate with to build apps for those users. We do have an app that, like a front-end facing application that either could use right now, but like that's just something we're building in the early days. Like ultimately, it's going to depend on integrations. We are an infrastructure layer, and developers can openly integrate with that. No permission required, and we're hoping to see a lot of that in the future.
Well, thank you all. I know we're running late on time. Do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap it up? We'll wrap it up. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I think we're all headed to the party, so if you have any questions, feel free to tap us on the shoulder there and ask us there. We're happy to chat. Thank you to the DAOist, and thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Yeah, come talk to me about automation.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm not sober anymore. You don't have to respect me. But I want to inform all of you about the party flow that's about to start. So the rumors are not fake. There is a massive party. So I'm sorry to inform you if you feel that this is like, oh, time to rest. No, this is just half the problem. The other half of the problem starts now. There will be 4 buses arriving in about half an hour to carry a maximum of 200 people to the party venue. If you don't feel like you want to be in a weird bus with a bunch of strangers, find your own form of transportation. It's at Arroz Studios. You spell that by ARROZ Studios. And just get a cab there. And there you will find a resting spot, free beer, massage, hammocks, and then slowly we will melt into a very intense techno party. So a little bit of healing, and then a little bit more damage, because that's how it grows, right? So make sure you tell your friends how to get there, how everything's going to work. Once you get there, you need your stamp. So if your stamp is going out, or you need to take a shower, etc., make sure you revamp your stamp, ask me for help, whatever. And let's try to have a great, responsible time at a venue that is just as big as this, but without the trucks in the middle. And it's going to be a huge party. There's art installations, and there's truly incredibly talented artists from now until 3 in the morning. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.